Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere colder than your office break room and slightly less comforting than your last dental checkup, the Victorian Asylum. Forget haunted houses and true crime podcasts. Victorian asylums were nothing short of horrifying. But don't worry, you're not getting locked up just yet. Before we get started, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're listening from, and let me know what time it is for you and what you might have been locked up in a Victorian asylum for. Now dim the lights, put on a fan for that soothing Victorian industrial ambiance, and get comfortable. Maybe tuck your toes in. Rumor has it, Victorian asylums are where cold feet were invented. Ever picked up your phone to check one notification, and suddenly it's midnight? Or rearranged your home screen at 2 a.m., not because it matters, but because everything else feels out of place? Congratulations! You may already qualify for a Victorian asylum. Welcome to 1884. The wallpaper is peeling. The hallway echoes. The nurse just asked if you often talk to yourself. You answered only when the Wi-Fi's down. Mistake. And yes, that's your aunt signing the papers. All because you tried to emotionally rank the spices in her kitchen. You said cinnamon is a hug and paprika is bisexual chaos. She called it mental instability. You call it Tuesday. Now you're trapped in a drafty old building where breakfast tastes like dust. The wallpaper might be alive, and someone just got sedated for humming too much. Honestly, it's not that different from a corporate wellness retreat. Except here, self-care means cold baths and pretending your emotions don't exist. So, what's your Victorian asylum symptom? Overthinking one emoji for 15 minutes, feeling deep guilt after skipping one text, crying to elevator music in public. If so, don't worry. Your room is ready, and the ghosts in the wallpaper, they relate. Arrival and first impressions. You might be fine, but no one believes you. You arrive at the asylum's looming iron gates, clutching your suitcase, and whatever pieces of sanity haven't been lost to late-night scrolling and 3-hour deep dives into ancient conspiracy theories. The building towers above you, Gothic arches, smugly symmetrical windows, and the very aura of a place that once considered left-handedness a diagnosable illness. The fog is thick like a bad decision. The coach that brought you rattles off into the mist, leaving behind the distinct smell of horse and emotional abandonment. You feel it in your soul, the same scent as that one week in 2020 when you thought starting a sourdough starter would fix your life. You pause. Not because you're afraid, but because your ankle does that weird pop it's been doing since you sat cross-legged on your bed for 6 hours researching, why do I overthink everything? The doors are enormous, imposing, slightly too confident. They seem to whisper, "We've been expecting you," and your aggressively curated Pinterest board. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Not dramatically, just enough to say, "Welcome to your era of consequences." You step forward. Your shoes crunch on the gravel like judgmental cereal. The flower beds are aggressively perfect, trimmed with the kind of discipline usually reserved for cults and prep schools. You could swear the bushes are arranged in a pattern that spells, "Control your impulses." You exhale. Somewhere behind a curtain you sense eyes watching. Maybe a patient. Maybe a curtain ghost. Maybe just a judgmental fern. It's hard to say. At the entrance, a porter greets you by name, which is unnerving, considering even you forget it sometimes while filling out online forms. He produces a ledger the size of a coffee table and an expression that says, "He definitely irons his socks." For the records, he says, as if this is a dentist appointment and not the start of a very niche horror movie. You sign. Your handwriting wobbles with the weight of too many unsent emails and 1,000 just checking in texts you never responded to. The doors groan open like they've been practicing for a local theater production called Guilt the Musical. Inside, it smells like lavender disinfectant, wet stone, and the quiet despair of people who once tried bullet journaling. You're ushered into a foyer painted a shade of beige so neutral it might be avoiding commitment. Portraits of dead Victorians glare at you like they've seen your browser history. One woman in particular seems to be silently judging your sleep schedule. Every surface gleams with the aggressive energy of someone who cleans to avoid crying. The floors shine like they've never seen a scuff mark or a boundary violation. A nurse in crisp white appears. Her smile is professional, warm, and so deeply suspicious you instinctively want to apologize for something. Anything. She says the asylum's philosophy is restorative tranquility through structure and fresh air. You glance at the windows. They don't open. She leads you down a hallway where your footsteps echo like guilt. You feel like you should whisper or confess something. You pass doors with tiny barred windows. Faces peek out. One whispers a recipe. Another warns you not to trust Thursdays. She shows you the amenities. The communal parlor, no card games after 6 p.m. due to the incident. The bath wing bathing is encouraged, but only on Thursdays. Group baths are a privilege, not a right. The garden walking in tight, anxious circles is considered therapeutic. You ask about books. She leads you to a reading room. It's mostly moral tracts, medical journals, and a copy of Coping with Hysteria, a guide for the nervously inclined. No novels. Too stimulating. You want poetry. She offers a pamphlet titled Obedience as Serenity. Finally, you reach your room. It's clean, small, efficient. A bed, a desk, a chair. One window high and narrow, designed for maximum light and minimum escape. Hooks on the walls. For coats, probably. The nurse smiles. The mattress is genuine horsehair, as if you'll be grateful for sleeping on something that once neighed. She hands you your uniform, gray, tied at the back. One size fits no one. As she leaves, the lock clicks. Not loud, just final. You sit on the bed. It creaks beneath you as if judging your posture. You think back. Was it the night you alphabetized your apps by emotional support value? Was it when you started color-coding your Notes app and named each folder after moods? Was it the Tuesday you panicked because you forgot if you liked eggs or just thought you were supposed to? That's the thing. No one ever tells you the exact moment you cross the line. 1 minute, you're reorganizing your desktop folders at 2 a.m. because your soul feels cluttered, and the next you're being handed oatmeal and referred to as a resident. From somewhere down the corridor, someone sings, off-key, passionately. Another voice mutters something about the wallpaper being a spy. You lie down. The horsehair prickles your shoulder blades. Congratulations, you've arrived. First impressions. In true Victorian fashion, You feel both extremely noticed and completely invisible. And it's only day 1. Admission is a breeze if someone else does it for you. The speed at which you get admitted is almost impressive. Almost. If you've ever clicked "accept all cookies" without reading a word, you've already consented with more scrutiny than this process involves. It's the Victorian DMV, except instead of walking out with a license, you lose your name, your shoelaces, and the legal right to have opinions. It starts with a room that smells like ink mothballs and quiet judgment. You sit in a stiff chair across from a physician whose mustache enters the room 3 seconds before he does. He doesn't look at you. He looks through you like a man trying to decide if you're a person or just an especially anxious fern. He turns instead to the person who brought you here. This could be a distant cousin, a bitter ex, or a neighbor who once saw you crying at a cucumber in the market. Whoever they are, their voice is full of false concern and real drama. She reorganizes her bookshelf by emotional trauma, they say, pausing just long enough for the tears to glisten. He once narrated his own walk to the bathroom like a podcast. The doctor nods gravely. He's heard enough. He doesn't need context. He doesn't even need a pulse check. He just needs his quill. Diagnosis: prone to moods. Mild hysteria, compulsive creativity. Probably dangerous in a group setting. All it takes is 2 signatures. One from the enthusiastic accuser and one from a man who thinks leeches are still a valid form of treatment. That's it. No trial, no debate, no chance for you to explain that naming your plants after Greek philosophers is actually very normal behavior. Now comes the questioning part. It's a formality, really, a quiz you can't win. Do you often think about cabbages? Say yes, you're obsessed with nonsense. Say no, you're suppressing intrusive thoughts. Do you sometimes laugh at inappropriate times? Yes, unstable. No, emotionally repressed. How often do you feel feelings? There is no safe answer. You try to be polite. You try to be honest. You even try a joke. They write patient attempts humor under pressure. Delusional coping mechanism. Then comes the examination. A second doctor enters, monocled of course. He measures your pulse, racing your pupils anxiously hopeful, and your posture offensive to God and furniture alike. He asks you to count backward from 100 by 7s. You hesitate. You ask for clarification. Mistake. Confused under light cognitive strain. You answer quickly. Bigger mistake. Displays manic tendencies. You try to stall. Fatal. Defensive behavior. No matter what you do, it's wrong. It's like trying to pass a vibe check in a room full of ghosts. They weigh you, note your scars, comment on your modern sensibilities, and take detailed notes on the way your fingers tap against your knee. They confiscate your items, your headphones, your stress snack, that one comforting lip balm you forgot to hide. Then comes the uniform, a gray gown that fits like existential dread. It ties in the back because God forbid you feel secure. You're walked down a corridor by a nurse whose grip could crush a watermelon. She smiles, but it doesn't reach her eyes. It barely reaches her teeth. She goes over the rules. No shouting after sunset. No card games involving metaphor. No escape attempts before breakfast. No asking where the Wi-Fi is. You reach your assigned room. It's clean in the way hotel rooms feel before the murder happens. One bed, one blanket, one window that's technically a window but functionally a decorative hole. The mattress is stuffed with genuine horsehair, which they say proudly, like it's luxury, like it won't poke you with ancestral guilt all night. You sit down. The bed groans under your overthinking. And now you reflect. Was it the time you color-coded your apps by emotional intensity? Or the week you made a spreadsheet ranking every breakup you've ever had by soundtrack? Was it the Tuesday you couldn't decide if you were sad or just dehydrated? Maybe it was when you replied, "No worries," to an obviously infuriating email, and then cried in the shower like a Victorian ghost. The truth is, no one ever tells you the moment it happens, the moment you go from quirky to questionable, from just stressed to should we call someone? One day you're journaling at 3 a.m. in a color-coded system, and the next you're here watching your suitcase disappear down a hallway labeled Inspection Room. The hallway echoes with odd sounds, singing, whispering, someone reciting pi digits backwards. You hear footsteps and laughter, or crying, or both. It's hard to tell. You're no longer a person. You're a resident, a file, a case. The nurse calls you by a number you've never heard before. You ask why. She says, "It's easier this way. Welcome to the Victorian Asylum, where all it takes to get committed is one overly dramatic sigh and a suspicious love of poetry. Getting in is easy. Getting out, not so much. And sanity, that's optional. Just like the windows." The common room. A living catalog of anxieties. You step into the common room where time seems to have stopped, somewhere between a seance and a very uncomfortable tea party. The scent hits you first. A potent cocktail of carbolic soap over boiled cabbage, and something vaguely floral, but mostly emotional decay. It's like depression decided to wear perfume. The room is buzzing in its own quiet way. Not loud, but full of small, strange sounds. Someone humming the same 3 notes over and over, a chair creaking rhythmically as if possessed, the soft rustle of someone repeatedly flipping through the same page of a book with great intensity despite not actually reading it. Welcome to the Victorian version of a group chat, except no one knows the topic everyone's typing, and all the emojis are hallucinations. Across the room, a chess game is unfolding between 2 men using buttons as pawns, and what appears to be a hardened biscuit as the queen. If the biscuit crumbles, they just agree to play around its remains. Because rules are fluid here, especially reality. You try to blend in, make no sudden movements. Should you sit? Stand, nod politely at the man talking to the grandfather clock. You opt to hover awkwardly by a faded armchair caught somewhere between observer and potential threat. Every resident is a walking mystery novel with half the pages torn out. Diagnoses here feel more poetic than medical. There's a woman sketching cats obsessively on every available surface, walls, chairs, even her own shoes. Her file says, "Feline preoccupation." A man paces the room reciting Latin poetry with the intensity of a cursed professor, classical agitation. Another insists he's a railway conductor and blows an invisible whistle anytime someone enters the room, locomotive delusion. Every introduction is either dramatically formal, "I am the Countess of Winchestershire, recently returned from the Crimean front," with a suspicion of mercury, or entirely cryptic. One woman simply whispers, "The furniture listens," and then hands you a wilted flower as if it answers everything. You accept it. That's just what you do here. Some patients offer gifts like currency, a bent spoon, a lock of their own hair, a preserved beetle named Reginald. You keep Reginald. He seems trustworthy. You learn quickly that there are hierarchies. There's the philosopher by the fire who speaks only in riddles, the whisperers by the window who always seem to know who's next for hydrotherapy, and the man who thinks the floor tiles are a map to Atlantis. You made the mistake of standing on Crete earlier. He hasn't spoken to you since. Conversations follow no structure. A simple "How are you today?" can spiral into a monologue about Victorian footwear, or a full-fledged performance of Hamlet, abridged, sung, and out of order. It's best to just nod, murmur something vaguely profound. "Ah yes, the wallpaper does seem to be in mourning today," and keep moving. Still, there's a strange solidarity here. Everyone is both profoundly alone and completely entangled. A group of the most creatively anxious people you've ever met. There's the failed poet who only speaks in backward limericks, the ex-bank clerk who gives unsolicited financial advice to anyone carrying a handkerchief, the middle-aged woman who claims her condition is existential disappointment, chronic and untreatable. There's comfort in the absurdity, a camaraderie formed not by choice but necessity. You trade rumors like currency, which nurse will sneak you extra toast, which corridor echoes longest when you scream into it. One patient swears the wallpaper is reading minds. Another believes the bread is poisoned, not to kill but to make you feel nostalgic for sadness. Honestly, not far off. Some residents are still, not silent in peace, but like clocks that ran out of time and were never rewound. Wrapped in shawls, staring into the fireplace with a focus usually reserved for decoding the universe. You sit beside them sometimes pretending you're also unraveling something great, when in reality, you're just wondering if you left your existential will to live back in your suitcase. Staff drift through the room like museum guards, detached, efficient, faintly bored. "Don't mind him," a nurse says, as one patient shouts accusations at a teapot. "He thinks it's the Archbishop." The nurses call it restorative routine. You call it Victorian-themed purgatory. There are dozens of official diagnoses, some apparently invented on the spot. Rural melancholy, overeducated lassitude, excessive daydreaming with undertones of romanticism. Each one gets a Latin name, a footnote, and possibly a note about your posture. You overhear a new arrival ask what their diagnosis is. The doctor replies, "We prefer to let it emerge naturally, like a sad butterfly," which feels appropriate. You begin to pick up on the subtle rhythms of the room. Tea is served at precisely the wrong temperature. Games are played with half the rules missing. Gossip spreads like a Victorian flu, feverish and occasionally fatal to someone's reputation. There are therapy circles where patients pass around invisible objects and speak to them like estranged lovers. No one questions it, and yet somehow you start to feel seen, in the weirdest, most unhinged way possible. No one asks why you talk to yourself because someone else is arguing with a curtain. No one shames you for mood swings because the man next to you is composing an opera about his breakfast. You realize the asylum is less a prison and more a very dramatic group chat, with bad lighting and worse snacks. You're all in it together, strangers, each with your own haunted subplot. It doesn't matter what brought you here. Maybe you organized your bookshelf by heartbreak. Maybe you cried because your tea was too confident. Maybe someone misread your silence as rebellion. The point is, you're here. You've got a mattress full of horsehair, a roommate who thinks the moon is spying on her, and a beetle named Reginald. And weirdly, that's starting to feel like enough. Welcome to the common room, where sanity is a spectrum. Chairs are emotionally claimed, and everyone's just trying to get through the day without being reassigned to hydrotherapy. A tour of the therapeutic corridors. The architecture of the asylum, I've come to realize, is a form of psychological warfare dressed up as moral design. It's therapy via intimidation. The ceilings are absurdly high, cathedral-level, tall, meant to inspire humility or perhaps vertigo. The windows are arched and elegant and sealed tighter than a Victorian corset. And the corridors, miles of echo-cold drafts, and the haunting suspicion that someone is watching. Spoiler, they are. Your first real introduction to the space is called a restorative walk, which is a fancy term for being paraded past rooms you may one day scream inside. The nurse leading you glides silently across the polished floor with the serenity of a woman who has long since stopped questioning her life choices. She talks the whole way, voice full of optimism so brittle you could use it to slice bread. At the asylum, we believe architecture is a form of treatment, she chirps. As you pass a hallway that resembles the set of a Gothic murder mystery. The wallpaper is floral in theory, but in practice looks like it has opinions about your mental health. The tiles are always cold, regardless of season, and the walls are painted in that special color known as Victorian beige, designed to soothe you while also slowly draining your will to live. Notice the symmetry, the nurse says, gesturing to the evenly spaced windows. It creates balance. You're not sure whether she means emotionally or architecturally, but you nod anyway. The windows open just enough to let in air, but not quite enough to let out despair. Or you. The corridors twist and branch, like the inside of a very passive-aggressive maze. Each one opens up into yet another hallway that looks nearly identical to the last, except for a painting of a frowning bishop or a bust of someone who probably disapproved of dancing. Echoes follow you relentlessly. The clink of keys, a cough, distant singing, and occasionally someone practicing their death monologue at full volume. Every few minutes, a gust of air sneaks through the old vent system, chilling you to your institutional issue socks. We believe fresh air is vital for clarity of mind, the nurse adds, just as another Arctic breeze attempts to fold you in half. You hug your gown tighter. It offers about the same protection as a hospital napkin. You pass the central staircase, which looks like something out of a tragic opera. Ornate iron railings, steps polished by 1,000 panicked footsteps, and a grand chandelier that's either beautiful or a lawsuit waiting to happen. Lingering on the stairs is discouraged, mostly because that's where wandering doctors roam, and they love a spontaneous case review. There are doors everywhere, some marked with numbers, some with acronyms like CTD or RDM. You ask what they mean. The nurse smiles in a way that suggests you shouldn't. One door is labeled simply Experimental Wing, authorized optimists only. You don't peek inside, but something peeks back. Next, you're led into the communal washrooms. It's a row of metal basins lined up like penitents awaiting absolution. Hot water on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the nurse notes. You ask what day it is. She avoids eye contact. You glance at the bathtubs, each wide enough for a good soak and narrow enough to provoke an identity crisis. One has a chain hanging from the ceiling. You don't ask. You make a mental note to bathe when absolutely necessary and ideally unconscious. Then the laundry room. A symphony of steam soap and the unmistakable smell of institutionalized surrender. Uniforms are folded with terrifying precision. Blankets are starched to the consistency of regret. You wonder how often your sheets will be changed. The answer is probably on schedule, but never when needed. In the kitchen, you pass large iron pots bubbling with something vaguely edible. The cook waves a ladle cheerfully, the movement splattering something beige onto the floor. Nutritious and mild, the nurse says. You translate, won't kill you, but might haunt your dreams. The gardens, however, are genuinely lovely. Gravel paths wind through trimmed hedges and tired flower beds. One bench faces the sun at precisely 3 p.m. It's always taken. You ask about the locked gate. The nurse says it's for your safety. You notice the man guarding it has shoulders like a wardrobe and carries keys the size of dinner forks. Outdoor activity is encouraged. Nature soothes, says the nurse, as another patient chases a squirrel with intense suspicion. You're told gardening is permitted so long as the tools stay supervised and the plants remain non-political. Finally, you reach the recreation room, a dim but earnest space filled with scattered chairs, dusty chessboards, and a bookshelf so thoroughly looted it only contains one Bible, 2 outdated encyclopedias, and a copy of Robinson Crusoe, missing all the pages where he feels hope. There's a locked cabinet marked Amusements. Inside, dominoes missing all the 6s, a deck of cards with suspicious bite marks, and an ancient sewing kit used exclusively for mending sanity. One woman is doing needlepoint. The words say, "Help me." It's unclear whether it's a joke. You are reminded gently that scheduled recreation is strictly observed. Chess before tea, silent contemplation after, and under no circumstances may you perform Hamlet in full without prior approval and at least one chaperone. The tour ends mercifully back at your room. The nurse smiles. We're always nearby if you need us, or if you attempt to scale the ivy trellis. She glides away, and you're left standing in a corridor that seems to stretch forever in both directions. You think about all the doors you've seen, all the ones that were locked, all the ones that looked back. You don't know what's more therapeutic here, the architecture, the silence, or the certainty that absolutely nothing is up to you anymore. Welcome to the Victorian Asylum, where every corridor is carefully designed for your healing, and every draft is legally classified as a treatment. Say goodbye to personal style. Welcome to Fashion Week. Victorian Asylum Edition, where the only trend is uniformity, and the runway is paved with self-doubt and institutional despair. Say goodbye to personal style, because here, individuality is treated with the same suspicion as a fork in a lightning storm. And you, dear newcomer, used to mock Crocs wearers. Now, your slippers are 90% cardboard and 10% institutionalized shame. Karma, it seems, wears stripes. The transformation begins in a room optimistically called clothing allocation, which sounds mildly bureaucratic, but feels more like the wardrobe department of a very sad circus. The nurse in charge greets you with the energy of someone who gave up caring sometime around the Crimean War. She brandishes a measuring tape with the enthusiasm of a woman who's measured one too many nervous breakdowns. She eyes you up and down, no actual measuring necessary. "You're a medium, probably," she mutters, before disappearing into a pile of clothing so uniform it would make a monastery blush. You are handed what can only be described as a striped linen smock, the love child of pajamas, and a canvas tent, and a pair of slippers that seem to be made of regret. Changing is a ritual in itself. Off go your clothes, your dignity, and anything with buttons. On goes your new identity, baggy smock number 34. Your belt shoelaces, and even your lucky pebble are confiscated. For safekeeping, they say, which is Victorian for, "You'll never see it again unless it turns up in someone else's therapy session." The smock is both generous and cruel. Generous in size, one size fits all, provided you enjoy tripping over your own hemline. Cruel in design, striped in such a way that no human body looks proportionate in it, the color somewhere between unsalted porridge and emotional surrender. If you're lucky, you'll also receive a matching cap that serves no practical purpose besides ensuring everyone knows you're part of Team Institutionalized. The cap does not keep you warm. It does, however, keep your hopes grounded. And stylishly so. Trousers, if provided, are cinched with a drawstring that's simultaneously too short to tie and too long to ignore. For ladies, the outfit includes a gown that flutters with every draft, like a haunted picnic napkin. The look is best described as early morning couture. And the slippers, oh the slippers. They have the texture of stale toast and the emotional support of a sarcastic cat. Walking in them feels like participating in a group ritual of collective resignation. Everyone shuffles. No one struts. It's less of a stride and more of a slow-motion funeral march for your individuality. You soon discover that personal style is not just discouraged, it's considered a medical concern. Buttons are contraband. Ribbons, rebellious. Even rolling your sleeves earns you a stern reminder about therapeutic symmetry. Once a patient tried to sew a flower onto their collar. Legend says they're still in solitary cross-stitching daisies into the wallpaper of their mind. Laundry day adds insult to indignity. Despite a strict rotation, everyone's smock somehow smells like bleach-boiled despair and someone else's crisis. Even when you check the tags, you're never sure whether you're wearing your own gown or that of the man who thinks he's Queen Victoria's butler. Occasionally, rebellion blooms in subtle ways. Someone tucks their smock into their trousers. Someone else dares to wear their cap at a jaunty angle. These acts of fashion terrorism are short-lived. The nurses have a sixth sense for asymmetry. If your collar so much as flirts with flair, expect a visit from the Wardrobe Correction Task Force. Still, after the initial humiliation fades, there's something oddly comforting about looking like everyone else. No decisions to make, no judgment, no need to pretend you have your life together based on your sock choice. There's a democratic charm and collective absurdity, and really what is style but a performance of stability. Here everyone gets to be equally unflattering, equally ridiculous, and equally liberated from the tyranny of trends. It's like a spa retreat, but instead of cucumber water and facials, you get moral resignation and shared delusions. You learn to embrace the uniform. It's the one thing here that makes sense. The outside world demands choices: blue or black, jeans or slacks, leather or linen. In the asylum, your biggest fashion decision is whether to tuck your drawstring inside or out. Pro tip: always tuck in. It's less tempting for the voices. Soon you start recognizing people not by their clothes, but by their walk, their laugh, their preferred corner of the common room. You bond over mutual discomfort, shared laundry mix-ups, and the slipper that somehow ended up in the soup pot. Don't ask. There's even a kind of fashion etiquette. Don't take someone else's cap even by accident. Don't criticize the way someone belts their smock with dental floss, especially if they used to be a dentist. And under no circumstances should you ever say, "That looks good on you." It doesn't. It looks exactly the same on everyone. In time, the uniform becomes less of a costume and more of a shield, an equalizer, a soft, shapeless embrace from the institution that now owns your body, your mind, and your shoelaces. You stop caring what you look like. You start caring who sits beside you. You laugh when someone dares to wear their smock backwards, even if it means double hydrotherapy. Fashion, as it turns out, is overrated. Comfort is a myth. But shared absurdity, that's pure gold. So you shuffle on in your cardboard slippers and your porridge-colored smock. You nod to the man wearing 3 caps. You give a thumbs up to the woman with her sleeves rolled exactly 1 inch above regulation. Because in the Victorian asylum, every day is pajama day. And no one's judging unless your cap is crooked. Welcome to institutional chic, where matching outfits are mandatory and self-expression is stored in the lost and found. The Victorian sleep experience. As the gaslights dim and the cold stone walls close in, you're gently escorted into the most haunting sleepover of your life. Welcome to the Victorian Sleep Experience, TM, where rest is optional but psychological deterioration is complimentary. Let's start with your bed, a thin straw mattress that appears to have lost the will to live sometime in the late 1700s. Lumpy in all the wrong places, it crackles like a dying campfire every time you breathe. You try to get comfortable, but unless you identify as a loosely packed scarecrow, you're in for a night of poking and existential questioning. The blanket. Imagine someone crossbreeding sandpaper with a burlap sack and then whispering the word comfort ironically as they handed it to you. It's exactly 1 inch too short to cover your entire body, forcing you into a lifelong debate. Cold feet or cold shoulders. Pick your battle. The pillow is a cruel joke, more a tragic fabric envelope filled with yesterday's regrets than a cushion. You lie on it and instantly regret all previous times you ever took pillows for granted. If karma had texture, this would be it. Your room is a minimalist's fever dream. 1 bed, a bolted-down table the size of an afterthought, and a rickety chair that clearly witnessed several past breakdowns. High-set windows let in just enough moonlight to remind you of everything you've lost, including your sleep hygiene and your ability to feel joy. The air smells like boiled cabbage soap and despair. It's like living inside a disappointed grandmother's sigh. The wind howls through forgotten cracks with all the subtlety of a haunted accordion. You lie awake and listen, not just to the usual creaks and groans of an ancient building, but to the musical score of institutional madness. Down the corridor, someone is whispering prime numbers. 2 doors down, a man is snoring in Morse code. Somewhere above you, a spirited debate about giraffes is being waged with the emotional intensity of a courtroom drama. Then there's the orderly making his hourly patrol with the stealth of a marching band. His boots hit the floor like a metronome for your insomnia. Each jangle of his keyring is a reminder that freedom is both a concept and a punchline. Sleep comes in waves, small, pitiful waves that crash before they reach the shore. One moment you're drifting off, the next you're wide awake, wondering if that sound was a pipe groaning or your mattress letting out its final sigh. Eventually, your body does that thing where it gives up before your mind does. You fall into a series of confusing micro-naps, the kind that leave you more tired than you were before. Dreams, if they come at all, are just reruns of you being chased by your old boss, but he's dressed as Queen Victoria and shouting about proper table manners. There's an art to pretending to be asleep here. You learn it quickly. Steady breathing, relaxed shoulders, and one eye half open in case someone walks in. The night staff operate like ghosts with clipboards. One moment you're alone, the next. There's a whisper, just checking you haven't escaped or spontaneously combusted. You whisper back mentally, "Not yet." Sometimes you catch laughter echoing faintly through the hall. Genuine, if unhinged. Once someone farted with such grandeur that an entire wing of patients burst into applause. It was without question the highlight of the week. And through all this chaos, there's a strange sense of community. Misery may love company, but insomnia throws the best after-parties. You're united not by comfort, but by shared discomfort. No one's sleeping. Everyone's suffering. And somehow that's almost soothing. There's a guy down the hall who hums lullabies to his slippers. Another one insists on reciting Shakespearean monologues to a dying ficus outside his window. And then there's you trying to cocoon yourself in a wool rectangle and praying your pillow doesn't file for emotional abuse. Eventually, dawn crawls into the sky like a hungover cat. The first light dribbles through the window, catching the dust in soft angelic beams that somehow make everything look worse. You sit up, hair doing its best impression of a haunted hedge, eyes, crusty soul crushed back, regretful. Congratulations, you survived another night in Victorian sleep hell. You didn't sleep well or at all, but you didn't accidentally drink the mop water either. That's a win. You've become one of them now. The people who wake up more tired than when they went to bed. The ones who mutter curses under their breath while brushing their teeth with what feels like a shared sponge. The people who stare into their tea, searching for meaning in the steam. There's no morning alarm here, just the sound of breakfast trays clattering and someone shouting, "No, you're the Earl of Sandwich," from the next room. You peel yourself out of bed, your blanket clinging like a needy ex, and start the day with all the energy of a Victorian paperclip. Because in the asylum, rest is a myth, comfort is a conspiracy, and the only guarantee is that tomorrow night you'll be right back here wondering whether your mattress is slowly trying to eat you. Sleep tight. Or don't. It doesn't really matter. Welcome to the Victorian Asylum. where the beds are terrible but the company is certifiably unforgettable. The Victorian sleep experience. As the gas lights dim and the cold stone walls close in, you're gently escorted into the most haunting sleepover of your life. Welcome to the Victorian sleep experience, where rest is optional, but psychological deterioration is complimentary. Let's start with your bed, a thin straw mattress that appears to have lost the will to live sometime in the late 1700s. Lumpy in all the wrong places, it crackles like a dying campfire every time you breathe. You try to get comfortable, but unless you identify as a loosely packed scarecrow, you're in for a night of poking and existential questioning. The blanket. Imagine someone crossbreeding sandpaper with a burlap sack and then whispering the word comfort. Ironically, as they handed it to you, it's exactly 1 inch too short to cover your entire body, forcing you into a lifelong debate: cold feet or cold shoulders. Pick your battle. The pillow is a cruel joke, more a tragic fabric envelope filled with yesterday's regrets than a cushion. You lie on it and instantly regret all previous times you ever took pillows for granted. If karma had texture, this would be it. Your room is a minimalist's fever dream. One bed, a bolted-down table the size of an afterthought, and a rickety chair that clearly witnessed several past breakdowns. High-set windows let in just enough moonlight to remind you of everything you've lost, including your sleep hygiene and your ability to feel joy. The air smells like boiled cabbage soap and despair. It's like living inside a disappointed grandmother's sigh. The wind howls through forgotten cracks with all the subtlety of a haunted accordion. You lie awake and listen, not just to the usual creaks and groans of an ancient building, but to the musical score of institutional madness. Down the corridor, someone is whispering prime numbers. 2 doors down, a man is snoring in Morse code. Somewhere above you, a spirited debate about giraffes is being waged with the emotional intensity of a courtroom drama. Then there's the orderly making his hourly patrol with the stealth of a marching band. His boots hit the floor like a metronome for your insomnia. Each jangle of his keyring is a reminder that freedom is both a concept and a punchline. Sleep comes in waves, small, pitiful waves that crash before they reach the shore. One moment, you're drifting off. The next, you're wide awake, wondering if that sound was a pipe groaning or your mattress letting out its final sigh. Eventually, your body does that thing where it gives up before your mind does. You fall into a series of confusing micro-naps, the kind that leave you more tired than you were before. Dreams, if they come at all, are just reruns of you being chased by your old boss, but he's dressed as Queen Victoria and shouting about proper table manners. There's an art to pretending to be asleep here. You learn it quickly. Steady breathing, relaxed shoulders, and one eye half open in case someone walks in. The night staff operate like ghosts with clipboards. One moment, you're alone, the next, there's a whisper. Just checking you haven't escaped or spontaneously combusted. You whisper back mentally, "Not yet." Sometimes you catch laughter echoing faintly through the hall, genuine if unhinged. Once someone farted with such grandeur that an entire wing of patients burst into applause. It was without question the highlight of the week. And through all this chaos, there's a strange sense of community. Misery may love company, but insomnia throws the best after parties. You're united not by comfort, but by shared discomfort. No one's sleeping, everyone's suffering, and somehow that's almost soothing. There's a guy down the hall who hums lullabies to his slippers. Another one insists on reciting Shakespearean monologues to a dying ficus outside his window. And then there's you trying to cocoon yourself in a wool rectangle and praying your pillow doesn't file for emotional abuse. Eventually, dawn crawls into the sky like a hungover cat. The first light dribbles through the window, catching the dust in soft angelic beams that somehow make everything look worse. You sit up, hair doing its best impression of a haunted hedge, eyes, crusty soul crushed back, regretful. Congratulations! You survived another night in Victorian sleep hell. You didn't sleep well, or at all, but you didn't accidentally drink the mop water either. That's a win. You've become one of them now. The people who wake up more tired than when they went to bed. The ones who mutter curses under their breath while brushing their teeth with what feels like a shared sponge. The people who stare into their tea searching for meaning in the steam. There's no morning alarm here, just the sound of breakfast trays clattering and someone shouting, "No, you're the Earl of Sandwich from the next room." You peel yourself out of bed, your blanket clinging like a needy ex, and start the day with all the energy of a Victorian paperclip. Because in the asylum, rest is a myth, comfort is a conspiracy, and the only guarantee is that tomorrow night you'll be right back here wondering whether your mattress is slowly trying to eat you. Sleep tight. Or don't. It doesn't really matter. Welcome to the Victorian Asylum, where the beds are terrible but the company is certifiably unforgettable. The dining hall, a temple to lukewarm food. The dining hall welcomes you with the warmth of a dentist's waiting room and the culinary promise of nutritious disappointment. It's a cavernous space that echoes every clatter of cutlery like it's a war crime. You shuffle in alongside a troop of equally sleep-deprived souls, all dressed in matching stripes, resembling a sad underfunded barbershop quartet. Most look like they've been personally ghosted by Queen Victoria. Your meal, a 3-course disappointment. One grayish paste of ambiguous origin, a slice of bread that clearly died last week, and tea so watery it qualifies as a Victorian ghost itself. The orderly slops your portion onto your tray with the same enthusiasm you'd expect from someone sentencing you to emotional community service. The paste could be gruel. It could be wallpaper glue. It could be porridge that gave up halfway through puberty. It jiggles when it shouldn't, and somehow tastes like regret with hints of what if. The bread arrives next soggy in spirit and temperament. If anxiety had texture, this would be it. The crust is both razor-sharp and rubbery, yes, simultaneously. Biting it feels like chewing on a memory of a biscuit that never had a chance. And then there's the tea. A shade of beige that suggests someone waved a tea bag over a pot of hot water and whispered, "Do your best." It smells faintly of sadness and old socks. One sip and your taste buds file a formal complaint. But hey, at least it's warmish. Sometimes, sugar, ha. The idea of sugar is met with laughter by the staff. Salt is a communal effort, a shaker that's more clump than crystal. One patient tries to request butter. The orderly looks at them like they've just asked for the moon. You sit near a window for fresh air which smells like boiled turnip and moral disappointment. The view. A single crow standing on gravel, possibly judging you. Conversations are permitted as long as they involve the weather, the queen, or deeply uncontroversial potatoes. Someone mentions toast. The mood shifts dangerously. Some patients have coping mechanisms. One arranges their bread slice into tiny triangles like edible origami. Another tries dipping everything in tea, possibly in protest, possibly in hope of flavor transfer. One optimist declares the tea is not so bad today. They are immediately met with silence and quiet suspicion. Every so often, someone attempts to trade their gruel for someone else's bread, which is the Victorian version of black market economics. Occasionally, someone scores a secret crust of real bread from a visitor. That person is a legend for at least 5 minutes. Meanwhile, staff sip from steaming mugs that smell suspiciously pleasant. No one asks what it is. We all know we're not allowed. 15 minutes later, you shuffle out full-ish, sadder and slightly more crumb-covered than before. You return your tray, the last clink marking the end of your spiritual endurance test. Congratulations. You've survived breakfast in the asylum, a team-building exercise disguised as a meal. You've endured gruel, weaponized bread, and the beverage equivalent of a shrug. And the worst part, you'll be back tomorrow. Same food, same tray, same crow. A day of occupational therapy. Your day starts not with a sunrise or birdsong, but with matron throwing open the curtains like she's unveiling a crime scene. It's 7:00 a.m., sharp, and her claps could wake the dead. You used to think you weren't a morning person. Now you realize you just weren't being forcibly activated by someone who drinks vinegar for fun. Breakfast. You've survived that beige ordeal already. Now it's time for occupational therapy, a fancy phrase for busy work until your brain gives up. The day's schedule is scrawled on a chalkboard so clean it could double as a mirror. The handwriting immaculate. It's giving this chalkboard has its life more together than you. First activity, knitting. You're handed a blunted needle and a pile of yarn that looks like roadkill. Apparently, you're making a scarf. Realistically, it's an uneven rectangle that doubles as a cry for help. The last guy who tried to knit something vaguely noose-shaped now talks exclusively to spoons. You don't ask. If knitting's not your vibe, there's basket weaving, a delicate dance between patience and emotional collapse. You start with hopes of a Pinterest masterpiece. You end with something that screams, "I tried." Is it a bowl? Is it a hat? Is it a symbol of your unraveling? Yes. Mid-morning, it's time for fresh air, which means marching in a loop around the garden like sad geese. You follow an orderly who struts like he's on a runway in Milan. You spot the same 3 pigeons every day. They look back like, "We've seen things." Croquet sometimes happens, but it's less a game and more a security risk. Someone tried to vault the fence with a mallet last week. Now, the mallets are made of rubber. Dignity has left the chat. Back indoors, it's rest hour. Not for actual rest, mind you. You sit upright on a wooden chair that hates your spine, stare at a crack in the wall, and think about your choices. Someone breathes too loudly. Another hums a hymn that no one asked for. You contemplate reincarnation and whether you were a mildly annoying Victorian librarian in your past life. Next group reflection. You sit in a circle of creaky chairs surrounded by people pretending they're fine. The nurse says, "Let's share our feelings." Someone mutters cloudy with a chance of screaming. A man in the corner delivers a TED Talk on the psychological trauma caused by floral wallpaper. You agree, silently. After lunch, still gray, still depressing, it's time for independent activities. You're allowed to read, but only pre-approved texts, the Bible, Pilgrim's Progress, or a gardening guide from 1843. You try to turn it into a thriller. It doesn't work. Music Hour features a piano so out of tune it sounds like it's begging for mercy. Someone attempts green sleeves with the confidence of a drunk uncle. It's chaos with rhythm. Art therapy is technically an option, but you're only allowed to draw positive imagery. Someone once sketched a thunderstorm and was promptly handed a pamphlet on gratitude. So now it's just trees. Happy ones. Always with 5 leaves. No more, no less. Then comes the second round of occupational therapy. Because if knitting once didn't fix your soul, doing it again definitely won't. Some people tend the garden, which mostly means arguing with worms. Others do laundry, which is 90%, wondering if socks are supposed to feel like wet cardboard. Evening free time arrives, which just means you're free to sit in your assigned chair and question reality. Someone tries learning French with a smuggled phrasebook. Je suis fatigué becomes the unofficial motto of the room. You quietly rearrange your dominoes into a message that says, "Send snacks." There are small acts of rebellion. A sugar packet swap. A hidden biscuit. Someone draws a mustache on Queen Victoria's portrait in the hall. It's gone by morning, but the legend lives on. By bedtime, you're tired, not from effort, but from existence. The staff insists structure is healing. And you know what? Maybe it is. Because even though your uniform is itchy, your thoughts are weird. And you named a pigeon Gary, you made it through another day. You didn't escape. You didn't scream. You didn't try to mail yourself in the laundry cart. That's called progress. Welcome to occupational therapy in the Victorian Asylum. It's not paradise, but at least the pigeons remember your name. The hydrotherapy experience. You're led into the hydrotherapy room with the same enthusiasm one reserves for a dentist appointment or a surprise tax audit. According to the Victorians, water cures everything. Anxiety, hysteria, vague sadness, probably heartbreak too. What you're really getting is a wet slap from the 19th century. The room smells like damp towels, cheap soap, and regrets. Tiles stretch across the floor in a color that once dreamed of being blue. A series of porcelain tubs lines the walls, each one big enough to drown your optimism. Somewhere overhead, water drips steadily from a pipe like a slow countdown to your personal splashdown. Your nurse arrives, holding a pamphlet in one hand and trauma in the other. She explains the healing powers of water while eyeing you like a cat about to bat a glass off a table. Steam opens the pores. Cold shocks the nervous system. Showers cleanse the soul. Translation: you're about to get hosed in more ways than one. Step 1. The cold plunge. It's exactly what it sounds like. You're told to step into a tub filled with water that feels like it was personally imported from an iceberg. It's invigorating, the nurse chirps, as your entire body clenches into a single goosebump. She sets a timer because, apparently, freezing counts more if you can measure it. You sit there shivering and questioning your life choices while the tub whispers, "This is your life now." Survive that, and it's time for the douche. No, not that kind. This is Victorian code for getting sprayed across the room by a water cannon masquerading as therapy. There's the jet douche, good for your spine. The spray douche, great for your mood. And the surprise from behind douche, fantastic for keeping you alert. And deeply mistrustful of plumbing. One moment you're standing calmly, the next you're reenacting a car wash with no car. Then comes the blanket wrap. They swaddle you in damp sheets like a burrito of despair and leave you to simmer in your thoughts. Allegedly, this draws out toxins. Realistically, it draws out memories of every mistake you've ever made. You lie there immobile, trying not to sneeze or sob. Across the room, another burrito person makes eye contact. You share a silent bond of damp dignity. Now for the steam box. You sit in a wooden contraption that looks like it should store cabbages with only your head sticking out. It's part spa, part human crock-pot. Sweating is healing, they say, as your eyebrows begin to steam. Someone asks about your childhood trauma while your kneecaps slowly melt. You reply, "Fine, thanks," because there's no polite way to say, "I feel like a boiled dumpling." Throughout all this, staff float around, adjusting dials, scribbling in charts, and occasionally offering encouragement like, "You're doing so well," or "Only 10 more minutes of targeted dampness." You consider faking unconsciousness, but that might earn you a bonus bath. Eventually, you're handed a scratchy towel and told to air dry, which is code for stand in a corridor and question the meaning of personal hygiene. You look down at your soggy slippers, 90% cardboard, and 10% sadness, and wonder when dignity left the building. Hydrotherapy won't fix your problems, but it will distract you from them, especially when you're being aggressively misted by a nurse with a grudge. And maybe that's the point. Maybe if you're wet, cold, and vaguely humiliated, you'll forget why you came here in the first place. Congratulations. You've survived another session of therapeutic drowning, Victorian style. You are now spiritually cleansed, physically damp, and emotionally suspicious of bathtubs. Onward to knitting, or whatever other mildly humiliating activity awaits. At least the pigeons don't judge. Moral management. The original office timeout. In the Victorian asylum, healing doesn't start with medicine. It starts with manners. Welcome to moral management, where mental health is measured by your ability to smile through existential despair. Thank the matron for bread that tastes like wallpaper glue, and sit very, very straight. The philosophy is simple, polite conversation, and good posture will fix everything from anxiety to full-blown delusions. You're not sad, you're just slouching. Each morning starts with a wave of relentless cheer. Nurses sweep through the corridors like motivational speakers in aprons armed with quotes instead of medicine. A sunny outlook chases away the shadows. One chirps despite the fact that the only sunlight you've seen in a week is a badly painted mural of a sunrise in the group room. If you look too gloomy, a nurse may gently push the corners of your mouth upward into what she calls a smile, and you call a facial cramp. Conversations are encouraged, but only the approved kind. No talk of politics, trauma, or the mysterious brown stain on the dining hall floor. Instead, you are expected to chat about the weather, Queen Victoria's impressive longevity, or the fascinating texture of boiled turnips. Silence is only acceptable if you're nodding thoughtfully, not brooding. Wistful sighs, immediate intervention. Your performance is tracked. Actual notes are taken. Patient attempted wit. Wit failed. Recommended posture drills. Speaking of posture, yes, that's a whole category of treatment. Shoulders back, chin up, spine like a steel beam. There are daily inspections led by an orderly who walks like he's got a ruler strapped to his back and trauma strapped to his soul. Lean for even a second, and you'll be asked sweetly if you'd like to visit the reflection chair. Ah, the reflection chair. The Victorian version of being sent to HR. It's a wooden seat, placed in a main hallway under a huge, judgmental painting of the asylum's founder, who looks like he hasn't smiled since the invention of candles. The chair has no cushion, no view, and no mercy. You sit, you reflect, or you fake reflecting while planning your escape. Either is fine. Group sessions are a special kind of social circus. Every day you sit in a polite circle and practice civil conversation. You're handed topic cards. The joys of early rising, the moral benefits of embroidery, or why complaining is for weak minds. The boldest patient once tried to discuss toast preferences. He's not allowed to pick cards anymore. Being kind earns you gold stars on the progress board. Compliment someone's slippers, star. Fold another patient's blanket. Star. Refer to staff as ma'am or sir star. Fail to participate extra time in the reflection chair and possibly an essay on humility. That's right. Writing assignments for your soul. Most patients figure out the game fast. You learn to laugh politely, sit properly, nod when someone says virtue is its own reward, even if you're internally screaming. By the end of the week, you've developed the uncanny ability to smile and maintain eye contact while disassociating completely. It's a talent. Sure, it's all a bit performative, but honestly, some days pretending to be fine feels easier than explaining why you're not. Everyone's faking it, even the staff, especially the staff. There's a nurse who's so upbeat she might explode. You start to wonder if her tea has more than just herbs in it. By now, you know how to play the part posture perfect conversation. Light smile, locked and loaded. You're not sure if you're getting better or just better at pretending. But you do know one thing: if you ever slip up, the reflection chair is always waiting. And that wooden seat, it never forgets. The rest. Cure. A vacation from sanity. If you're exhausted, overwhelmed, or God forbid, opinionated, congratulations, you've qualified for the Victorian Asylum's favorite therapy, the rest cure. A revolutionary treatment designed to help you find calm by stripping away everything that makes life remotely bearable. Think of it as a mental health vacation without the vacation or the health. Step 1. Confinement. You are led into a small, sunlit room by a nurse who looks like she's been emotionally retired since 1842. The room smells faintly of boiled linen, cough syrup, and low expectations. There's a bed, a window too high to reach, and a single painting on the wall of a potato. A lonely, judgmental potato. You're tucked into bed with the precision of a military burrito. Then come the rules: no talking, no reading, no movement unless supervised. Definitely no thinking too loudly. At first, it doesn't sound too bad. No small talk, no moral posture drills, no surprise. Hose. Therapy. Sign you up. You lie back on your scratchy straw mattress, pull the wool blanket up to your chin, and try to enjoy doing absolutely nothing. That lasts exactly 20 minutes. Then you meet your new best friend, boredom. Boredom like you've never known before. You begin counting ceiling cracks. You give the fly buzzing near your head a name and backstory. Gregory. He used to be a banker. Now he just hovers. You briefly consider blinking in Morse code for help. Then remember, blinking is frowned upon unless medically necessary. You spend a full hour wondering if the potato in the painting is silently judging you or just disappointed in general. Meals are delivered by a nurse so quiet, you're not sure she exists. They arrive on a tray, steamless and joyless boiled eggs, mashed potatoes, and a glass of milk that tastes like it was filtered through regret. You eat in silence, chewing slowly, imagining what seasoning might be like. Sometimes you whisper salt to yourself, just to feel something. Books forbidden. Letters from home. Too emotionally spicy. Even chatting with your pillow is considered an overstimulation risk. To pass the time, you stage mental plays starring the potato painting, Gregory the Fly, and your shrinking will to live. Eventually, you forget what your own voice sounds like. You wonder if you'll ever laugh again, or if you already did once and it's just been medically erased. If you're lucky, a nurse fluffs your pillow. If you're really lucky, she opens the window for 5 whole minutes of air that smells slightly less like boiled despair. These are the highlights. Visitors are allowed, but only if they speak in gentle tones and ask questions like, "Isn't the wallpaper soothing?" If someone dares bring up the outside world or politics, they're quickly redirected to the weather. You've never heard so many passionate monologues about cloud formations in your life. Someone talks about fog for 15 minutes. You cry a little. After a few days, you understand why former rest cure patients took up hobbies like embroidery, birdwatching, or full-scale mental rebellion. You fantasize about folding laundry. You dream of sweeping a floor. Anything to feel useful or upright. You start missing the chaos of group embroidery. You miss the lukewarm tea. You miss noise. Eventually, the doctor returns with a notebook and the smile of a man who clearly hasn't tried this therapy himself. "How are we feeling today?" he asks. "This is a trap." Say rested, and you risk another week. Say bored, and you get a lecture on the beauty of stillness. Your safest bet is to sigh deeply and murmur something about gratitude. This pleases him. You are now officially deemed calmer Victorian code for compliant enough to release. You rejoin the general population, blinking against the social stimulation of group embroidery and lukewarm tea. Everything feels loud, fast, and dangerously engaging. You miss Gregory the Fly a little. And the potato, mostly the potato. But you've survived the rest cure. And while it hasn't exactly cured you, it's definitely broken you in the most politely repressed way possible. Congratulations. You are now certified emotionally stable, mostly because you no longer feel much of anything at all. Dinner, the ultimate social test. Dinner at the asylum isn't just a meal. It's a psychological obstacle course disguised as soup. You shuffle into the dining hall with 50 other tired souls forming a solemn conga line of confusion and mild hunger. The room echoes with the sound of clunky shoes, clinking cutlery, and quiet despair. You take your place at a long, joyless table that looks like it was designed for interrogations, not nourishment. The setup is pure Victorian efficiency. Thick bowls built like stoneware fortresses, spoons heavy enough to double as weapons, and slices of bread that could legally be classified as bricks. The staff hover nearby like underpaid zookeepers, eyes sharp, ready to pounce if anyone gets too creative with their cutlery or tries to trade their carrots for someone else's mystery meat. Then it arrives, your stew. It's ladled into your bowl with a theatrical flourish like they're unveiling fine art. A puff of steam rises, so does your suspicion. You peer into the bowl and meet a murky concoction best described as meat adjacent. Could be beef, could be lamb, could be something that once had legs and an attitude. Even the kitchen staff won't confirm. You poke at a grayish chunk that jiggles. It does not inspire confidence. Still, you eat. Because what else are you going to do? Each bite is a roll of the flavor dice. Sometimes it tastes like salt. Sometimes like nothing. Occasionally, dangerously, it tastes like something, but you can't put your finger on it. And honestly, it's better not to try. Conversation is technically allowed, encouraged even, but only in the same way your aunt encourages you to talk about your career at family dinners. That is only if it's boring, polite, and totally free of truth. Safe topics include the weather, preferably fog, the Queen's latest hat, or how delightfully smooth the mashed turnips are today. God forbid anyone mentions politics, emotions, or the mysterious disappearance of last Thursday's orderly. If you do, the matron will glide silently over like a Victorian ghost and give you a look that could peel paint. You'll immediately switch the subject to cloud density and pretend you weren't about to cause a revolution. Still, dinner has its own underground culture. Long-term patients whisper coded messages about where to sit to avoid the cold draft, or how to fold your napkin just right to signal you're willing to trade bread crusts for peas. The new folks watch nervously, trying to figure out the pecking order. Spoiler, it's mostly determined by who sits closest to the pudding tray. Speaking of vegetables, they exist. Technically, carrots are soft enough to qualify as liquids. Peas disintegrate on contact. Turnips. Well, we don't talk about the turnips. They're a shared trauma. The bread is always stale, but somehow comforting. It's basically an edible sponge, perfect for soaking up whatever liquid courage your stew came with, or for gently smashing the lumpiest bits into edible submission. And then, miraculously, some nights there's dessert. Pudding, beige, lumpy, mysterious. But oh, the joy it brings. Everyone stares as it's served like it's the second coming of joy itself. One time, someone found a raisin in their pudding and was treated like a prophet for a week. Legend has it, they even got second helpings. As dinner winds down, there's a universal symphony of scraping bowls, awkward burps, and long sighs. You've made it. You ate. You talked about fog. You didn't scream or demand seasoning. Congratulations, you passed the test. The nurses return to clear trays, moving with the ceremonial slowness of monks delivering holy relics. They hand out the evening pills with solemn nods, and maybe, if you're lucky, a whisper of well done for not starting a mashed turnip rebellion. You rise, belly half full and spirit mildly confused, and shuffle back into the hallway like a seasoned survivor. There's something oddly satisfying about making it through dinner. Not because of the food, of course, but because somehow this bizarre ritual of stew-stale bread and weather chat has become the closest thing to a social life you've got. Tomorrow's menu, probably stew again. Same taste, same mystery, same spoon that could bludgeon a table into splinters. But the company remains wonderfully unpredictable. And in a place like this, that's as close to entertainment as it gets. The doctor's ingenious tests. Welcome to the Victorian Asylum's official How to Prove You're Insane Without Even Trying obstacle course. It's not really medicine. It's more like psychological bingo where sneezing, blinking, or having a single opinion earns you a shiny new diagnosis. Your first appointment begins with 3 doctors entering the room like it's a crime scene. All of them have sideburns that radiate judgment. One sharpens a pencil with the seriousness of a man preparing to duel. Another makes eye contact so intense you feel like you're about to be burned at the stake for having emotions. Test 1. The clock drawing showdown. You're handed a piece of paper and a pencil so blunt it should be considered a crayon. Please draw the time 10 minutes past 2, says the lead doctor, like this is a final exam for sanity. You try, you fail. The clock looks like it's melting. The doctors huddle whispering like you've just invented a new time system. Abstract relationship with time, one mutters scribbling into your file. You've already lost, and it's been 3 minutes. Test 2 feelings are suspicious. You're handed a tiny book of poetry. Not to enjoy. No, this is a trap. If you cry at the sad poem, you're too emotional. If you laugh at the silly one, you're inappropriate. If you stare blankly, you're emotionally stunted. The only correct reaction is a solemn nod, while pretending you can't see the doctor judging your soul. Test 3 memory maze. Repeat these 3 words, apple candle king. You nail it. Then they ask you to say them backward. You do. You smile. Big mistake. Now you're excessively self-satisfied, and that's noted as a potential psychosis. Should have just said turnip and accepted your fate. Test 4. The headache. Interrogation. A doctor asks, do you ever get headaches? Say yes. You're clearly anxious. Say no. You're in denial. Say only when being asked dumb questions like this. Sarcastic. Dangerously witty. Definitely unstable. Test 5. Mirror, mirror on the wall. You're told to stand in front of a mirror and describe what you see. If you fix your hair, you're vain. If you don't, you've given up on life. If you blink too much, you're fidgety. If you don't blink, you're cold and calculating. You begin to wonder if breathing at all is considered a symptom. Test 6. The morality scan. Now comes the weirdest part. The morality quiz. How honest are you? How humble? How do you feel about cheese? Low scores, immoral. High scores, delusions of righteousness. Basically, unless you answer like a lactose-intolerant monk with amnesia, you're failing. Test 7, word association, roulette. The doctor says sunshine. You say rain. They scribble. You say queen. Someone coughs and writes potential political instability. Answer too fast. You're impulsive. Too slow. You're depressed. Answer? Just right. Congratulations, you've unlocked absolutely nothing. By the end of it all, the doctors sit together, looking at your file like it's the script to a tragic comedy. Very interesting, one of them says, in the tone of a man who's about to classify you as a rare bird. They leave. You sit in silence, wondering if you've passed the test, failed it, or just made the cover of their next textbook on eccentric oddities. In the end, the only thing that's clear is this at the Victorian Asylum. The line between being mad and just being kinda quirky is thinner than their lukewarm breakfast tea. And unfortunately, you blinked 3 times during the poetry test. So yeah, that's going in the file too. Visiting day. The awkward family reunion. Once a month, it's showtime, the day when your family gets to visit, and collectively pretend you're just here on a relaxing holiday, instead of locked in the Victorian version of a group therapy haunted house. The excitement starts early. The matron storms down the hallway like she's directing a fashion show for the criminally anxious. Hair is brushed. Sort of clothes are straightened if you count shaking off crumbs, and everyone's told to look alert, but not twitchy. The goal convincing your relatives that you're not currently planning an escape via broom closet. The visiting room smells like lavender potpourri, boiled cabbage, and mild disappointment. Flowers wilt nobly in a chipped vase, as if they too have accepted their fate. The chairs are arranged like a royal inquisition, enough space to look polite, close enough to prevent smuggling. Staff patrol the perimeter holding clipboards and suspicious smiles that say, "We're watching you." Especially you, Uncle Greg. The families enter like contestants on a reality show no one signed up for. Your mother is already crying. Your uncle is eyeing every window like he's considering his own escape. And then there's your aunt, armed with perfume opinions and enough unsolicited advice to start a podcast. She sits down with the grace of a judge preparing to announce a sentence. Well, she says loudly, "This is much nicer than I expected." And look at that wallpaper. Ah yes, the wallpaper. No one asks what you think of it, which is lucky, because your honest opinion, trauma in print, probably wouldn't help your case. Conversation is like walking a tightrope over emotional lava. Everyone wants to know how you're doing, but absolutely no one wants the truth. Say you're fine. Great. They move on to discussing the weather and mention the electroshock hose or the mystery stew. Suddenly, everyone's sipping tea like it's a crime to speak. Your cousin dares to ask, "Made any new friends?" You casually mention your roommate, who thinks he's the reincarnated Queen Victoria, and your cousin nearly chokes on his shortbread. Aunt Advicedom springs into action. She suggests smiling more, sitting straighter, and maybe, just maybe, stop talking about overthrowing the monarchy at dinner. She's heard about the reflection chair and is convinced it's the magical cure for all your weirdness. Just agree with whatever the doctor says, she whispers, even if it's about squirrels in your brain. Meanwhile, the staff lurk nearby, ears perked, ready to write up your father, if he so much as passes you a newspaper with a spicy headline. Hugs are allowed, but under supervision, and only if no one looks like they're hiding a key in their waistband. The shortbread tastes like dust and tension. The tea is warm disappointment in a cup. And when conversation inevitably hits a wall, someone always breaks the silence with, "The gardens are lovely, aren't they?" Because nothing screams healing like a tidy hedge. Your mother clutches your hand, whispering about daily prayers. Your aunt volunteers to discuss your bedroom temperature with the head doctor. Your uncle gives a thumbs up without breaking eye contact with the nearest exit. Eventually, the visit ends with too many hugs, too many promises to come back next month, and a flurry of waves like you're departing for a long voyage instead of heading back to room 4B. The door closes. The staff swoop in to remove the tea tray and replace the flowers. You're left with the tick of the wall clock, the smell of boiled cabbage, and your aunt's voice echoing in your brain. Just smile more, dear. Victorian family visits, part encouragement, part denial, and 100% proof that sometimes the wallpaper really is the sanest one in the room. Therapeutic treatments, spa day. But make it medieval, welcome to your healing journey where the phrase self-care means bleeding, spinning, or being blasted with mustard water until you forget your own name. Here in the Victorian Asylum, the treatments are many, and none of them are gentle. Let's begin with the fan-favorite bloodletting. Feeling anxious, got a headache, just generally too alive. Don't worry, the doctor will fix that by unleashing your inner hemoglobin. Enter the leeches. Yes, actual leeches. Or, if you're classy, a scalpel and a saucer. The goal, balance your humors. The result, you now faint at the sight of tomato soup. Prefer less squirming. They'll offer the updated method, a quick slice, a gentle gush, and a nurse yelling, "Catch them as you go limp." Then we have the blistering plasters. Sounds cozy, right? It's not. It's like being slapped with a piece of fabric soaked in whatever alchemy potion was left over from the apothecary's nightmare. You're left with a welt the size of your self-worth. But, hey, great icebreaker in group therapy. Feeling restless, step right up for a spin in the rotating chair. Basically, a wooden blender for people. You're strapped in, spun, until your organs reconsider their positions and told it balances your energies. All it really balances is breakfast onto the floor. Still not relaxed. Then it's time for cold water therapy. This includes surprise bucket dumps, screaming ice baths, and hoses with water pressure so aggressive it could take the paint off a ship. It's refreshing, say the staff. It's hypothermia, say your blue lips. Ah yes, the mustard foot bath. A truly gourmet option. Your feet are soaked in mustard-spiced lava water while you contemplate life choices. They say it improves circulation. You say it makes your toes consider unionizing. Of course, we can't forget the sedative draft. What's in it? Unclear. Could be laudanum, could be leaf water, could be regret in liquid form. All you know is that after one gulp, you feel a lot less worried about the rotating chair or anything else. Every procedure is performed with the kind of grim joy only Victorian staff can offer. They say it's therapeutic. You say it's character building. After a month of treatments, you are no longer sure if you're cured, exhausted, or just allergic to mustard. But one thing's certain, you'll never complain about modern medicine again. Or mustard. Definitely not mustard. Every asylum has a legend, and you're probably not it. Every madhouse has that one story. The legendary escape. The great jailbreak. The whispered tale of a patient who supposedly tunneled out using a spoon, disguised themselves as a nun, or waltzed through the front gate wearing a wig and the confidence of a visiting duke. Whether it actually happened doesn't matter. It's the hope that counts. In the Victorian asylum, where every door is locked, every window is bolted, and even the bushes look judgmental, escape feels impossible. But the human brain is a stubborn, crafty thing, especially when it's desperate to avoid one more round in the spinning chair of psychological doom. And so escape becomes a game, a hobby, a spiritual practice, a shared dream passed between patients like smuggled sweets or secret gossip. It starts with a question whispered during breakfast. If you were a window latch, would you rather be left-handed or right? Translation: you and congratulations. You've been invited into the most ridiculous underground resistance ever imagined. The Asylum Escape Club is unofficial, unrecognized, and absolutely unproductive, but wildly entertaining. You'll soon find yourself spending your days not just counting ceiling cracks, but watching the staff's movements like you're planning a bank heist. Who does rounds? When which nurse gets flustered by compliments? Who can be bribed with bread? Which hallway creaks like it has a guilty conscience? Forget therapy. This is how you build cognitive skills. Some plans are clever. Some are flat-out stupid. All are deeply heartfelt. There's the laundry cart gambit, in which a particularly skinny patient hides under wet sheets and just prays nobody notices a mysterious human-shaped lump bumping down the hall like a haunted pillow. Or the garden wall shuffle, a slow-motion attempt to scale the mossy stone fence during croquet hour, trying to blend in with shrubbery and pretend your foot on the ivy is just stretching. And who could forget the guy who tried the royal exit? He made a crown out of pudding tins, declared himself Duke of Breakfast, and marched out the front gate waving at everyone like he was late for Parliament. The guard actually saluted until he asked to see His Grace's papers, and the pudding tins gave him away. Love makes people foolish, too. Take the couple who bonded over their mutual hatred of boiled cabbage. They wrote love notes on Bible margins, met secretly in the linen closet, and made a dramatic moonlight dash for the outer fence. Got caught, of course. But hey, that's romance asylum style. Tragic, damp, and slightly moldy. Even when no one escapes, the dream lives on. Because honestly, half the fun is the plotting. It gives the day structure. You swap theories over watery gruel. You draw maps on napkins. You share escape stats like it's a fantasy football league. Most creative use of furniture. Most convincing fake illness. Fastest failure. 8 seconds, still a record. And sure, the place is basically a fortress. Heavy doors, barred windows, guards with clipboards, and no sense of humor. But hope. That's harder to lock down. Some patients take the slow burn approach. One legend simply walked out during visiting hours, holding a clipboard and pretending to be a confused junior doctor. He even corrected another patient's grammar on the way out. Bold, beautiful, busted in under an hour, but still a hero. Then there was the cook's assistant, who wasn't a cook's assistant at all, just a man with an apron, a potato, and a dream. He lasted 3 whole days, peeling vegetables, before someone realized he had no idea how gravy works. Caught, but iconic. Truth is, no one really escapes. Not often, not far. The walls are too thick. The world outside isn't much kinder. But that's not the point. The point is having something to look forward to. Something that makes your cold mustard foot bath a little less humiliating. Because when you're stuck in a place where your emotions are diagnosed, and your twitch is a symptom dreaming of freedom, is the one thing that still feels yours. Even the staff secretly seem to get it. They sigh when someone tries to run, but never yell. The matron just shakes her head and mutters, "At least it's cardio." They replace the lock, restock the bandages, and move on. Maybe they're rooting for us. Maybe they were us once. So at night, when the halls go quiet and the wallpaper sighs in disappointment, you lie in bed and think, if I tied 3 blankets together and distracted the nurse with a fake seizure and timed it between the 3 other rounds and tea, you're not actually going to do it. But that's not the point either. The point is everyone needs a story, even if it's made up. Especially if it's made up. Because stories are how we survive places like this. And in the grand asylum of life, some of us are just trying not to go mad in boring ways. The orderly guardian. Zookeeper and unpaid therapist. If the Victorian asylum were a ship, the doctors would be the captains yelling nonsense. The matrons would be the sea and the orderlies. They're the ones actually keeping the whole thing from sinking. They do it all, feed you, mop up your emotional and literal messes, stop you from licking the walls, and sometimes save you from being trampled by a therapy goat named Clarence. They're part guard, part janitor, part therapist, part human lie detector, and part reluctant magician. One minute they're unlocking the medicine cabinet with the calm of a monk. The next they're whispering, "Ta-da!" while pulling your missing sock out of a pudding bowl. You'll recognize them immediately. They're the ones power walking through the halls before sunrise. Clutching a clipboard, wearing an expression that says, "It's 7 a.m." And I've already broken up 2 fights cleaned up after a nervous breakdown and confiscated 3 homemade crowns. Each carries a giant keyring that jingles like a medieval tambourine and somehow always knows exactly where your slipper is, even before you realize it's gone. Honestly, if the rest of us had their memory, we'd all be free by now. Orderlies are everywhere. Escorting someone to hydrotherapy, breaking up arguments about whether Queen Victoria had a secret twin, serving gruel like it's Holy Communion, cleaning up suspicious stains with the kind of expression that says, "I don't want to know, and neither do you." They are the quiet guardians of chaos, unpaid, unappreciated, and fully capable of carrying both a fainting patient and a tray of biscuits without spilling a single crumb. They also know everything. Who's planning an escape? Who's secretly hoarding extra bread? Who's writing love letters to the nurse using alphabet soup? They know which hallway echoes the loudest, which doorknob stick, and exactly how long you can stand behind a curtain before it becomes suspicious loitering. If you've hidden contraband like a forbidden book or an emotional support, turnip, chances are the orderlies already found. It inspected it and returned it to its place with a mildly judgmental eyebrow raise. Despite the permanent frown and exasperated sighs, they're surprisingly compassionate. They're the first to notice when you're sad. They'll sneak you an extra boiled potato if they think you've had a tough morning. They'll pretend not to see you talking to the wallpaper and then ask, very casually, what it said back. When the matron's in a mood, it's the orderlies who quietly warn everyone to maybe not mention cheese today. And make no mistake, these people have seen things. One moment, they're helping someone out of a panic attack. The next, they're wrestling a therapy goat who's stolen someone's medical chart and is now sprinting down the hallway like it's Derby Day. When someone locks themselves in the broom closet, convinced it's a portal to 18 times, orifice, 18th century Paris. It's the orderly who negotiates peace in exchange for a biscuit, and a strict no Eiffel Tower policy during group therapy. There are legends, of course. Big Tom, who once caught a patient a teacup and a falling curtain in one swift motion. Miss Whitby, whose eyebrow alone can silence an entire room. And old Mr. Sneed, who's been here since the dawn of manners, distributes lemon drops and cryptic riddles, and is widely believed to be either immortal or just very, very tired. They're also the bridge between you and the rest of the institution. Need a message smuggled to the laundry room? A complaint about the temperature delivered to the doctor without sounding too dramatic? A coded note passed to your favorite patient in Ward C. The orderlies have you covered. They'll get it done with a wink, a nod, and a perfectly timed, "You didn't hear it from me." By the time you've been here a while, you realize something unexpected. It's not the therapy or the tea or the endless moral lectures that keep the place running. It's them. The overworked, underpaid, emotionally fluent, slightly jaded orderlies. They're the first to clap when you win a chess match, the first to notice when you've gone quiet, and the last to judge when you start naming the wallpaper patterns after your childhood pets. In a place where logic leaks out the walls and sanity is measured in spoons, they're the ones holding everything together. Not with power or prestige, but with practicality, patience, and the occasional emergency lemon drop. So here's to the orderlies, part furniture mover, part motivational speaker, part emergency goat wrangler. The real MVPs of the Madhouse. If you're lucky, one of them will call you kid, give you a knowing smirk, and hand you a mop like it's a sword. Because in the asylum, that's how we show love. The matron, the asylum's unyielding spirit. If the asylum were a kingdom, the matron would not just be queen, she'd be queen, general customs officer, and divine wrath rolled into one tidy ironed uniform. She doesn't walk. She glides like a ghost, powered by disinfectant and disappointment. Wherever she goes, silence follows chairs, scoot in backs, straighten, and even the dust mites panic and leave town. Your first encounter with her usually happens over breakfast. You're trying to butter some toast without making a scene when she appears, silent as doom, inspecting teacups and checking for unlicensed jam. Her shoes shine so brightly, they reflect your soul. Her cap sits like a crown carved from starch. Her uniform, so crisp you could probably slice a tomato with it. She's not just tidy, she's aggressively tidy. They say she hasn't slept since 1843. There's no proof she's human. One minute you're sneaking an extra biscuit. The next, bam, she's standing behind you, holding a clipboard and judging your life choices. Nobody hears her coming. It's like she materializes out of pure disapproval. Her talents are terrifying. She once spotted a breadcrumb under a bed from the hallway. She can detect a wrinkled bedsheet through walls. She sniffed out a banned romance novel that was hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible under a mattress beneath a patient pretending to be unconscious. Her feather duster isn't just for show, it's a wand of shame. And if she ever pulls out her notebook, just accept defeat. That smudge on your collar is now officially a moral failure. Cleanliness isn't just a policy here, it's her religion. Beds must be folded so sharply they can file taxes. Socks must face due north. Slippers must be perfectly aligned or risk being confiscated for attitude. The windows sparkle, the floor squeaks, and every pillow has exactly 95% fluff. Not too firm, not too limp. Or you're getting the look. Ah yes, the look. The matron doesn't need to raise her voice. She just raises one eyebrow and entire rooms go quiet. People confess crimes they haven't committed. Even the therapy goat stops chewing furniture. Her cough alone has caused card games to collapse, and one patient to rethink his entire worldview. She runs the place like a Swiss watch made of fear and lavender polish. From tea time to bath schedules to the sacred arrangement of spoons, every second of the day has been reviewed, approved, and possibly laminated. Step out of line, and she's there. Step back in line, and she's still there. She's the asylum's GPS, except you can't turn her off, and she doesn't tolerate detours. Even the doctors are a little afraid of her. They call her matron in the same tone you'd use to talk about an ancient curse. She's the only person who can lecture a psychiatrist on proper mental hygiene while also noticing a fingerprint on a teacup from 10 feet away. But here's the thing behind the terrifying symmetry of her apron and that soul-crushing posture. There are rumors. Whispers, really. Some say she once smiled. Others claim she once let a patient keep an extra biscuit off the record. A few even swear she helped someone sew a button back on their shirt and said, "Good job," under her breath. No one can prove any of this, of course, but it keeps hope alive. And oddly enough, the place needs her. Without the matron, everything would fall apart. Beds would go unmade. Spoons would be in the wrong drawer. There would be chaos, whispers, unsupervised card games. The patients know it. The staff know it. Even the goat knows it. She's not just maintaining order. She is the order. Her routine, her inspections, her sighs of disappointment. They're the glue holding the madness together. She's the reason the halls don't echo with screams, but instead with the soft hum of polish on tile. She's the unyielding, humming spine of the asylum. So yes, she might terrify you. She might haunt your dreams. You might break into a sweat every time she adjusts her cap. But admit it, when your slippers are perfectly lined up and your sheet corners are folded at a military angle, you feel weirdly proud, like you've survived something ancient and noble. And maybe that's the secret. The matron isn't just the boss. She's the last defense against entropy, the last standing champion of order in a world of unhinged teacups and slightly damp wallpaper. She doesn't just make sure the place runs, she makes sure it works. So next time you see her coming, straighten your spine, adjust your collar, and tuck in your sheet, like your life depends on it. Because it probably does. Night brings hourly check-ins. Once the matron has made her final rounds and tucked the last corner of order into place, night falls, and the next act of the asylum's never-ending theater begins. You'd think things would quiet down after sunset, that the padded walls and lavender-scented halls would finally offer peace. But oh no, the Victorian asylum doesn't sleep. It lurks. It begins with silence. Too much silence. The kind that makes your thoughts echo a little too loudly. Then the creaks start. Floorboards shift like they're stretching after a long day of judgment. Pipes groan with the misery of bad plumbing and ancient ghosts. And somewhere far off, someone coughs like they're auditioning for a tragic opera. Just as you're beginning to drift off, dreaming perhaps of escaping on a baguette bicycle down the coast of France, you hear it. The keys. It starts as a faint jingle, then a clink, then the unmistakable metallic chorus of a man with too much responsibility and not enough personal boundaries. The night orderly. His keys are his weapon, his instrument, and his entire personality. They swing from his belt like a necklace, forged from the broken dreams of those who tried to sneak an extra biscuit. The inspection begins. It's less about safety and more about tradition, like tucking in children or making sure your neighbor isn't summoning demons again. One by one, he reaches, each door pauses, and opens the tiny viewing panel because, yes, they installed peepholes from hell. If you're awake, you immediately pretend to be asleep. If you're asleep, your body senses the gaze and tricks you into dreaming that you're awake, staring at the orderly. This creates a weird emotional loop that leaves you feeling like you've just run a marathon with your eyes closed. The lantern beam swings in like a spotlight on shame. It scans your blanket, your face, your soul, and, crucially, whether your slippers are still neatly aligned by the bed. You may not be mentally stable, but you will meet footwear protocol. Satisfied, the orderly moves on, but only for an hour. There are usually 4 or 5 rounds a night, sometimes more if someone's had a spiritual incident or started reciting Latin backwards. Some orderlies are gentle like regretful ghosts in corduroy. Others stomp down the hallway like they're trying to punish the floor. These are the theatrical ones, the ones who dramatically yank open doors hoping to catch you doing something truly shocking, like knitting after curfew. What they're hoping to find, no one really knows. Secret tunnels, unauthorized emotions, midnight cheese. Your guess is as good as theirs. The longer you're here, the more you learn to time them. You know when the first round comes right after the last prayer, when the second hits after the hallway cough has echoed for the third time, when the third arrives during the hour that feels like time is melting into soup. You adapt. You train. You become a nocturnal ninja who sleeps lightly, breathes quietly, and always keeps a decoy book under your pillow, just in case. Some patients keep count. They treat the rounds like a sad version of bingo. Others try to beat the system, crafting pillow decoys, setting up fake snoring rhythms, even swapping beds with each other. These attempts are rarely successful, mostly because every door in the asylum has its own noise. A specific creak, a groan, a scream disguised as a squeak. These doors have personalities. None of them are quiet. You get used to it, or you pretend you have. That's the general rule here. Sometimes a nurse joins the rounds. She usually carries a small bottle of tonic and an air of someone who deeply regrets her career choices. Her job is to make sure no one has a fever, a smuggled novel, or a visible sign of joy. One patient claims she confiscated a copy of The Pickwick Papers in 1872, and it still hasn't been returned. By 4 a.m., you're floating somewhere between wakefulness and delirium, having a very intimate conversation with the ceiling about existential dread and digestive biscuits. You wonder, are they really checking for safety, or just making sure you never, ever relax, and then finally light? The keys fall silent. The lanterns go out. Somewhere toast is being burnt. The morning staff begins shuffling about, bringing the soft sounds of clinking teacups and trays rolling on wheels that always veer slightly to the left. You've survived. Another night. Another checklist. Another round of being accounted for, like an oddly shaped teapot in a haunted inventory. You're exhausted, sure, but still here, still present, still wondering how your neighbor got away with sneaking in a whole slice of cake and hiding it in the toilet tank. In this asylum, sleep is a fragile thing. Privacy is a myth. But your ability to adapt to smuggle joy in teaspoons and sarcasm is stronger than steel bars or jangling keys. Because after all, what's madness if not being fully awake when everyone else is just pretending? Occupational therapy, a summer job you never applied for. After a sleepless night of key-jangling patrols and flickering lantern light, you'd think the staff might let you sleep in. But no, this is a Victorian asylum, not a hotel. And while sleep is optional, purposeful labor is mandatory. At the crack of dawn, or what feels like it, after a night of pretending to sleep with one eye open, you're summoned to the main hall for the daily ritual of occupational therapy, which is just a fancy way of saying, let's see what we can make you do for free. The theory, according to the matron's sacred handbook, is that work calms the mind and restores moral order. The reality, it calms the budget and keeps idle hands from braiding the curtains into a noose. You stand in line, bleary-eyed, still tasting the flavorless porridge of disappointment, and await your assignment like it's career day in purgatory. Will it be gardening, laundry, sheet mending, or the dreaded button sorting reserved for those deemed especially twitchy today? If you're lucky or look convincingly sane, you'll be sent outside to the garden. It's the asylum's greenish patch of hope, full of vegetables that fear commitment and flowers that die just out of spite. You're handed a rusted trowel and told with zero irony to connect with nature. So you squat in the cold dirt poking what might be a carrot, a rock, or a cleverly disguised escape route. Occasionally, a supervisor strolls by shouting useful advice like, "Don't eat the petunias," or "The queen doesn't grow potatoes in her pocket," and neither should you. You nod solemnly, then catch the eye of another patient who's been hiding a beet in her sock for 3 days. Silent rebellion blooms everywhere. If the garden's full, or if your knees sound like a haunted accordion, you're sent to the laundry, the industrial underworld of the asylum. It's hot, loud, and always smells faintly of boiled despair. Here, thousands of identical uniforms are washed, pressed, folded, and occasionally lost to the abyss. This is where socks go to die. You start at the easy end, folding sheets, matching garments, trying not to cry, when you spot your own name sewn into a pair of trousers with a suspicious stain. If you show even the slightest mechanical skill, like turning a crank without fainting, you're promoted to the mangle, a soul-crushing contraption that flattens fabric and your will to live in equal measure. You quickly learn that the mangle is less therapy and more Victorian arm day. Your fingers are permanently wrinkled. Your forearms develop the density of tree trunks. You lose all fear of steam, and yet the pride you feel when a sheet emerges wrinkle-free is dangerously close to joy. So you smother it quickly. Joy is monitored here. For those with steadier hands or suspiciously quiet dispositions, there's mending duty. You sit in a circle with fellow linen warriors, needles in hand, stitching holes in sheets so old they probably remember the Crimean War. There's a rhythm in out-tug sigh. Occasionally, someone pricks their finger and bleeds on the sheet. This is considered a spiritual offering and usually earns a pat on the back. If you're especially talented, the matron may bestow upon you the darning egg, a polished wooden oval that does nothing except make you look like you know what you're doing. And then there are the other jobs, the ones assigned when you need a little extra structure. These include dusting baseboards that have already been dusted twice that morning, polishing brass knobs until you can see your own inner turmoil reflected back, or the infamous button box where you sort hundreds of buttons by size, shape, and presumably mood. You begin to suspect this task is less about therapy and more about watching who snaps first. Meanwhile, a lucky few are sent to the kitchen where they spend the day peeling potatoes and dodging the cook's flying ladle. The cook is a legend. She can stretch a turnip into stew for 40 and silence a room with her glare. She once chopped an onion so violently it made the wallpaper cry. You admire her deeply and fear her more than the matron. Despite it all, there's a strange sense of purpose in these jobs. Maybe it's the way everyone hums quietly while folding sheets. Maybe it's the gossip traded over potato piles. Maybe it's the defiant joy of hiding a flower between two mended blankets. At the end of the day, you are sweaty, sore, and a little more feral. But you've contributed. You've mended something, folded something, planted something. You feel, dare you say it, useful, which in here is both suspicious and therapeutic. And as you collapse onto your precisely made bed with your precisely placed slippers and exactly one state-issued pillow, you smile just a little. You may be technically mad, but at least your stitching's improved. Music therapy. The torture of green sleeves. By the time occupational therapy ends, your hands aching from mending 200-year-old sheets, your dignity wrinkled like the laundry, you've earned a break. Or so you think. Enter music therapy, the asylum's idea of cultural enrichment. It happens once a week, like clockwork, and patients begin dreading it somewhere around Tuesday. By Thursday morning, the truly desperate start volunteering for extra potato duty just to avoid it. You hear it before you see it, the distant thump of the piano lid, a few questionable vocal warm-ups, and the unmistakable arrival of Mrs. Plumbly, the institution's music directress and eternal optimist. She floats into the room with the confidence of someone who once taught a parrot to hum Mozart and now thinks anything is possible. Mrs. Plumbly wears the same outfit every week. A piano print scarf draped dramatically over her shoulders, a brooch shaped like a treble clef, and a smile so fixed you suspect it's pinned from behind. Her perfume is equal parts rosewater and misplaced ambition. She believes firmly and loudly that music heals all wounds. No one has the heart to tell her that some wounds were doing just fine until she asked us to harmonize. The music room resembles a Victorian parlor that gave up halfway through redecorating. There's a rickety piano that wheezes when played too hard, a stack of warped songbooks and chairs so stiff they might qualify as orthopedic punishment. The mood is part choir practice, part group sentencing. You take your seat strategically close enough to hear the piano, but far enough that Mrs. Plumbly won't mistake your yawn for enthusiasm. She claps her hands once. Let's begin, shall we? Voices together, hearts as one. We begin with God Save the Queen, a rousing anthem of national pride if sung by people who remember 5 words and mumble the rest. One patient belts it out like they're on stage at the opera. Another mouths watermelon repeatedly. Someone in the back sings God Shave the Bean and is never corrected. The piano, sticky from last week's incident involving soup, emits a dramatic clang halfway through verse 2. Mrs. Plumbly beams. Wonderful start. Then comes Greensleeves. Every asylum has a song that haunts its halls. This one is ours. No one knows why it was chosen, but it's been sung weekly for so long some believe it predates the actual building. The melody is lovely, in theory. In practice, it sounds like a funeral dirge sung by ghosts who never warmed up. And then, the solos. Mrs. Plumbly, eyes shining, surveys the room like a game show host looking for her next victim. Who would like to share a piece today? A brave soul raises their hand. Mr. Dobbins, a former chimney sweep, with a voice like a boot in a drainpipe, stands up and announces, "This one's called My Mother Was a Teapot." No one's sure if it's a real song, but he performs it with such dramatic flair that we all clap anyway. Next, a woman named Alice attempts the Ash Grove, but halfway through is drowned out by a perfectly timed sneeze from the piano stool. The pianist, an orderly who lost a bet, pretends not to notice and keeps playing 3 beats behind. Then comes the instrumental portion better known as chaos set to rhythm. There's a triangle, a tambourine, a set of wooden spoons. You've never heard Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star interpreted through spoons before, and you hope never to again. Mrs. Plumbly loves it all. So expressive, so free. Her favorite game is Guess That Tune. She plunks out a melody that may or may not be Beethoven, and everyone guesses. Is it Chopsticks? No one ever wins, but we all pretend someone did, so we can move on. Meanwhile, the matron lurks in the corner like a particularly judgmental gargoyle ready to pounce at the first sign of musical rebellion. Improvisation is not encouraged. Neither is jazz. Still beneath the discord, there's something almost sweet about Music Hour. You see a fellow patient tapping their foot for the first time all week. You watch someone smile mid-song, remembering a dance from years ago. For a few minutes, no one's thinking about damp bed sheets or the therapy goat that bit someone on Tuesday. We're just a room full of odd, off-key souls making something that sounds vaguely like music. And that somehow feels like progress. As the final chord is banged out, half a note sharp, half a second late, Mrs. Plumbly bows dramatically. Splendid as always. Biscuits in the hallway. We file out mentally exhausted, but physically unharmed, which counts as a win in here. You've survived another music therapy session. You didn't get picked for a solo. You didn't break the tambourine. You didn't scream during Greensleeves. That's growth. And somewhere deep in your exhausted brain, you admit, maybe next week you'll try the spoons. Maybe. Spiritual improvement. Mandatory Sunday service. Just when you think you've survived the week, your sheets mended your tambourine, put away your sense of identity mostly intact. Sunday arrives, and with it, the inevitable march to spiritual improvement. It's not optional. Nothing with the word mandatory whispered by the matron ever is. At precisely 3 o'clock, just after lunch has begun to settle or revolt, the gas lamps flicker to life, and the staff begin herding the patients toward the asylum chapel, a room so beige, so symmetrical, so devoid of architectural imagination, it could have been designed by a particularly anxious monk. The pews are perfectly aligned in rows tight enough to discourage sin, and wide enough to allow one existential crisis per person. Seating is less assigned and more predestined. You always seem to end up wedged between two repeat offenders, one who hums every hymn in a different key like it's jazz, and another who mutters critical commentary under their breath, mostly about the load-bearing properties of the ceiling beams. At the back stands the matron, arms crossed, radiating a holy silence more effective than any Bible verse. One eyebrow twitch from her, and the entire chapel straightens its spine. She's not above issuing reflection chair time to those who fidget, daydream, or show inappropriate joy. And then, as if summoned by the collective dread of the room, the chaplain appears. He glides in like a shadow, with good posture, black robes billowing gently behind him, eyes twinkling, with the kind of reluctant hope usually reserved for teachers on the last week of term. He begins always with a warm welcome and a polite reminder that moral salvation is available to all, even those who were caught swearing at the garden gnome on Wednesday. His opening prayer is long, earnest, occasionally poetic, but mostly drowned out by the synchronized rumble of 40 hungry stomachs digesting turnip stew. He thanks God, the Queen, and Nurse Whitby's blood pressure pills. You're not sure which came first. Then comes the sermon, a mix of passive-aggressive life advice and motivational poster slogans delivered with the gentle urgency of a man trying to convince cats to take up knitting. Patience, he says, is a gift, and one we must practice, especially when your roommate insists on rearranging his socks alphabetically at 2 a.m. There's always a theme: gratitude, forgiveness, proper posture. Sometimes it's loosely based on scripture. Sometimes it's based on a particularly chaotic Thursday afternoon involving missing biscuits and one too many complaints about hymn quality. But the real magic comes when the chaplain pivots to practical applications. Be kind to each other. Be helpful. And for heaven's sake, stop hiding letters in the hymnals. A quiet rustle of guilty movement follows. One patient attempts to look innocent while subtly removing a folded escape map from page 42 of Rock of Ages. Next comes hymn time, led, of course, by the ever-present Mrs. Plumbly. Fresh off her musical triumphs, surviving Greensleeves with only one nervous breakdown, she clutches her hymnal like it contains the nuclear codes. Her piano scarf has been replaced with a hymnal shawl, which looks identical but is apparently more spiritual. She bangs out the opening chords of "Oh for a Thousand Tongues" to sing with all the delicacy of a cow tap dancing on a xylophone. And we sing. Oh, how we sing. Some of us hit notes. Others aim for them emotionally. One man croaks like a frog in prayer. Someone in the back turns every hymn into a sea shanty. The organ wheezes like it's dying in real time. But somehow we get through it, verse by verse, word by word, syllable by muttered syllable. At one point, a new patient stands up mid-hymn and begins reciting what sounds like an original psalm dedicated to the healing power of potatoes. He is gently encouraged to sit down, but his spirit remains undampened. As the final amen rings out a bit late, a bit off-key, the chaplain offers a closing prayer for moral strength, digestive peace, and better weather. He blesses the staff, the troubled, and the organist, whose knuckles are visibly trembling. He finishes with his trademark warning, "Let us not fall into the idleness of the spirit, for idle hands are likely to rearrange the hymn numbers into rude words." A pause, a glance at the board. Someone's already done it. Again. And so we rise, some reverent, some relieved, most just cramping from the pews, and shuffle out of the chapel. The matron is waiting by the door. She nods to the devout glares at the restless and whispers something to a nurse about someone plotting rebellion with a tambourine. You make it out safely with your soul allegedly improved and your legs asleep. And as you walk back to your room, passing stained glass windows depicting very judgmental saints, you realize something: spiritual improvement may be mandatory, but joyfully surviving it is entirely your own achievement. And next week, if anyone asks who changed, guide me, O thou, great Redeemer, to hide me. O you great turnip stealer, you know nothing, absolutely nothing. Discharge day, the final bureaucratic hurdle. When discharge day finally comes, it doesn't arrive with fireworks or applause. There's no parade, no farewell speech, and certainly no emotional montage set to piano music. Instead, it unfolds quietly, wrapped in paperwork, polite nods, and a slightly suspicious sense of freedom. The first sign is usually the gossip whispers traveling faster than the matron on inspection day. Someone's leaving. Did they escape? Did the queen intervene? Or has the matron finally had enough and started releasing patients like raffle prizes? The truth, as always, is far less dramatic. Your official therapeutic journey has reached its end, or more likely, your family has run out of patients' money or both. The process begins with a visit from the head doctor, who appears armed with a clipboard and unreadable expression, and questions so vague they feel like riddles. "How are we feeling today?" he asks, as if sanity can be measured like a weather report. You answer something safe, something balanced, just enough to suggest improvement without raising new concerns. "Quite well, thank you. Less suspicious of the wallpaper lately." He scribbles notes in what might be Latin and nods with the solemnity of a man signing off a library card rather than a human life. "Much improved," he declares, whether you say you're feeling hopeful or confess you've started naming your socks again. Next comes the ceremonial return of your personal belongings. A nurse arrives with a brown parcel marked with your name and the faint smell of mothballs. Inside are your old clothes, which feel strangely foreign after weeks in institutional stripes. You check the pockets, one handkerchief, 2 crumbs, and a pebble you don't recall owning. Gone, of course, are the more sentimental items. The letter you hid inside your mattress, the spoon you borrowed from the dining hall, your dignity. Some things, it seems, are meant to stay behind. Then the bill is presented printed on thick paper and thicker irony. It lists every service you received, whether you enjoyed it or not. Plain meals, cold baths, lukewarm therapy, and 3 solid weeks of being monitored while folding laundry. The line "miscellaneous distress" appears more than once, alongside hydrotherapy splash fee included. There is a column for entertainment, even though you're fairly certain being forced to sing Greensleeves off-key doesn't count. You're told to pay at your convenience, which translates to "now please" or "we know where your family lives." Just when you think it's over, The matron appears materializing like a judgmental ghost with a feather duster. She scans your outfit for lint, your posture for defiance, and your soul for lingering rebellion. She straightens your collar, gives your shoes a critical glance, and hands you a pamphlet titled Mental Hygiene for the Modern Lady or Gentleman. You flip through it later, mostly tips on avoiding excitement, maintaining order, and consuming an alarming amount of turnips. She offers a final nod, the kind that means both good luck and don't embarrass me out there. Before you can flee, there's one last stop, the exit interview. Here, you are gently discouraged from ever discussing what happened inside. The staff advises against sharing details about the rotating chair surprise mustard foot baths or the matron's legendary feather duster discipline. For privacy, they say, and everyone wants peace of mind. You're given a final diagnosis, carefully worded and impressively vague, something like sufficiently stable or no longer a threat to hallway order. At last, the doors open. You step outside into daylight that feels both too bright and not quite real. The gates close behind you with a satisfying thud. And just like that, it's over. You survived. Your mind is full of strange memories. Your hands still faintly smell of carbolic soap. And your pocket contains a pamphlet you'll never read and a bill you'll never pay. Outside, the world seems louder, messier, and slightly more absurd than you remember. Are you cured? Who's to say? But you're free. Free to return to normal life. Free to tell your story. Or more likely, free to simply smile when someone asks where you've been and say, "Oh, you wouldn't believe me if I told you." Life after the asylum. You're free now. Technically. But it quickly becomes clear that freedom comes with conditions, mainly pretending the asylum never happened while everyone around you quietly suspects you might reenact King Lear with the tea set. Your return to the real world starts with a reception committee of suspiciously polite relatives who greet you at the gates as if you've just returned from an expedition to the center of the earth. Or worse, Margate. Their hugs are stiff, their smiles determined, and their eyes dart like they're afraid you might lunge for the nearest shrub and start philosophizing to it. On the way home, the neighborhood performs a full-blown production of "We're not watching you, but yes we are." Lace curtains twitch, flower pots are overwatered. Mrs. Tuttle, who hasn't touched her hydrangeas in 7 years, suddenly develops a passionate commitment to horticulture, coincidentally, just as you walk past. The milkman greets you with exaggerated warmth, then quickly reverses, like you're armed with leeches and unresolved trauma. It's Victorian England where nothing spreads faster than scandal, except possibly measles. At home, the atmosphere is thick with the kind of silence normally reserved for funerals and family portraits. No one mentions it. Not directly. The word asylum is treated like an unholy spell that might summon the matron back into the living room. Conversations are carefully curated for neutral territory, whether the price of jam and how Cousin Alfred might be taking a little rest himself soon. Even jokes feel out of bounds. You laugh at a pun about turnips, and the room falls quiet, as if you've confessed to hearing voices again. Your old life greets you like an acquaintance who doesn't quite remember your name. You return to your job assuming you still have one, and find that your desk has become a storage depot for tax ledgers and one suspiciously thriving ficus. Your boss welcomes you back with the warmth of a man who's already rehearsed what to do if you throw a chair. Every cough, every pause, every misstep is met with subtle glances. You become hyper-aware of your every gesture. Did you just blink too slowly? Is it suspicious to drink tea with your left hand? Social gatherings feel like diplomatic missions. Friends smile too widely and ask how your holiday was. The bolder ones tiptoe around with questions like, "Did you, read much? Or was the food edible?" No one asks what actually happened. Instead, they watch for signs: too much laughter, not enough eye contact, or heaven forbid, humming Greensleeves at the supper table. The local children are less subtle. They treat you like a returned explorer from a haunted jungle. One boy asks if you met Napoleon. Another wants to know if you were locked in a tower or allowed to keep your socks. You find yourself both amused and weirdly honored. At least they don't pretend nothing happened. Church offers its own unique form of reintegration. The vicar offers a special welcome back, which includes a pointed sermon about resisting temptation and the healing power of punctuality. During hymns, you feel dozens of eyes checking to see if you're harmonizing or hallucinating. When you dare to sing with gusto, several pews shift uncomfortably as if awaiting divine intervention or a second opinion. Still, there are advantages. You become an expert at dodging awkward questions, perfecting the art of the cryptic smile. You know exactly how to steer a conversation away from nerves and toward safe topics like bread pudding or whether Queen Victoria actually laughs. You find camaraderie in unexpected places, fellow returnees, old souls who've also learned to fold linen under pressure and survive on a diet of boiled carrots and quiet dread. Eventually you realize the outside world is just another kind of institution. The uniforms are prettier, the therapy less obvious, but the rules are no less strange. You may not be cured, but you're resilient. You've learned that madness isn't always about screaming into the void. Sometimes it's simply pretending everything is fine, while the wallpaper whispers your name. And if late at night you catch yourself whispering multiplication tables backwards or checking the hallway for footsteps, well, at least now you know you're not alone, and you'll always know how to fold a sheet in military silence while making it look like therapy. Phrenology. The mischief bump. You haven't even unpacked your toothbrush before a man with cold hands and burning conviction sweeps into your room and starts fondling your skull. "Aha," he murmurs, running his fingers across the back of your head like he's kneading bread dough with spiritual intent. The bump of mischief most pronounced. Welcome to phrenology, where science meets storytelling, and your scalp is the star of the show. In the grand theater of Victorian medicine, phrenology is the crown jewel of completely serious nonsense. According to this celebrated science, every ridge dent or oddly placed lump on your head reveals something deep and profound about your personality. Your kindness, your love of opera, your likelihood to steal spoons. The asylum, being thoroughly modern in its devotion to yesterday's ideas, treats this like gospel truth. There's even a cheerful diagram on the examination wall showing a human head labeled with important traits like hope, destructiveness, and fondness for buns. Your personal evaluation is overseen by the asylum's official phrenologist, Dr. Po Pickering, a man whose hair is permanently wind-blown and who wears spectacles so thick they double as magnifying glasses for ants. He carries a set of calipers, a measuring tape, and the smug expression of a man who once diagnosed a goat with excessive ambition. "Sit straight," he commands, adjusting his tools like a sculptor, preparing to critique a particularly lumpy statue. Your bed, of course, offers all the ergonomic support of a wet lasagna, but you do your best. The exam begins. He pokes, he prods, he mutters things like notable elevation of wit and dangerous indentation of obedience. You hear scribbling. You assume it's notes. You hope it's not a sketch of your head labeled "Caution Wobbly Morals." He pauses dramatically. Your cerebellar dome suggests a rich inner life, possibly excessive. Do you often daydream about marmalade or revenge? You nod cautiously. He nods back as if this confirms everything. Yes, yes. Classic overdeveloped region of reflective idealism. Potential risk for poetic behavior. By now, you've learned that this isn't a medical exam. It's a fortune reading in fancier clothes. Each lump is treated like a personality prophecy. A flat spot means humility. A bulge suggests leadership, or possibly hoarding tendencies. Your left temple apparently indicates a mild interest in geography and a fluctuating sense of justice, which sounds like something you should apologize for in advance. Some of your fellow patients share their own phrenology fates. One man was told he had a hyperactive benevolence node and has been guilted into polishing everyone's boots ever since. Another woman, after a deeply dramatic forehead reading, was warned to avoid philosophical questions until at least Tuesday. Dr. Pickering is particularly excited by your generosity ridge, which he claims has the volume of a healthy mango. You're not sure if that's good, but you're too polite to ask. Naturally, this entire examination is now documented in your medical records under cranial profile. The doctors consult it as if it were a sacred map. One muses. Her chart suggests a high tolerance for nonsense and a low resistance to musical chairs. Recommend double dose of peppermint tea. Worse still, they've scheduled monthly remeasurements to observe any shifts in temperament via forehead fluctuations. You ask if that's common. They say yes in people with noteworthy curvature. By the end of the session, you're mildly dizzy and extremely self-conscious about your head shape. But there's also a strange comfort in it all. In a place where the mind is constantly questioned, it's oddly reassuring to have your skull praised, even if by a man who once declared someone's ears morally ambiguous. So you return to the common room with your dignity mostly intact, your head slightly sore, and your diagnosis fresh, a little rebellious, slightly whimsical, and definitely prone to mischievous inclinations. And really, in a Victorian asylum, there are worse things to be known for, especially if they come with the occasional extra biscuit and the enduring mystery of why exactly your skull is shaped like a question mark. Afternoons of wholesome entertainment. Afternoons in the asylum are devoted to what the staff proudly call wholesome entertainment, a term that quickly loses its meaning once you're halfway through a game of cards with no queens, no clear rules, and one fellow patient convinced he's playing chess. Recreation hour is meant to be the bright spot in your day, a cheery intermission between being prodded for cranial insights and dunked in cold water for your benefit. The staff wheel out a cabinet of games with the hopeful enthusiasm of Victorian salesmen and the subtle panic of people who know you're one broken domino away from a rebellion. They announce that such activities improve morale coordination and general virtue. But really, they fill the awkward void between lunch and tea with just enough distraction to keep people from organizing a union. The first activity, naturally, is cards. The institution owns several decks, none of which are complete. Hearts has no hearts. Poker has too many jokers, and whist devolves into a communal debate over whether or not the Queen of Spades can be substituted with a torn scrap of sheet music. Bluffing becomes a philosophical concept rather than a game mechanic. He's either got a full house or a napkin, someone whispers. It doesn't matter. The asylum rule applies when in doubt, the house wins. Always. Next come the puzzles. Glorious scenes of Georgian countryside with suspiciously square holes and solemn warnings not to lose the final piece, which is always already missing. You spend 30 minutes forming an almost complete picture of a sheep grazing by a stream, only to find that its face is absent, leaving behind a haunting, grass-chewing void. It's a metaphor, says the poetic patient, for the incompleteness of self. You nod impressed, and also deeply frustrated that you'll never know how many legs that sheep was meant to have. Then there's charades. What begins as innocent fun quickly descends into war. Teams form like ancient tribes. One group specializes in tragic novels, another in barnyard animals, and a rogue faction refuses to mime anything made after 1830. You try to signal pride and prejudice and end up accused of being a windmill. Clues become increasingly unhinged. 2 words. First word rhymes with orange. The tension rises until someone storms off, declaring they can't work under such uncultured conditions. The staff, mistaking chaos for healthy expression, make notes like show's initiative and demonstrates strong feelings about Jane Austen. Board games round out the chaos. Chess, though noble in theory, is played with mismatched pieces, a bishop substituted with a thimble, a rook that was once a spoon. The rules bend like damp cardboard, especially if someone's having a creative day. Checkers features buttons, pebbles, and the occasional hard candy. Dominoes collapse at random, usually when someone tries to stack them vertically for a challenge. It's unclear who's winning at any point, but everyone agrees that victory is largely a matter of confidence and whether or not you brought your own piece from laundry duty. Despite the confusion, there's a strange comfort in it all. You bond with fellow patients over lost tokens and broken rules, inventing new games like Guess Who's Actually Playing and pin the diagnosis on the patient. There's a gentle rhythm to the nonsense shared laughter, dramatic defeats, and the occasional scream of joy when someone finds a puzzle piece lodged in their slipper. Points are awarded for sportsmanship and cheerful attitude, but no one knows who keeps score or what the prize is. Someone says it's biscuits. Someone else says it's freedom. Everyone laughs. By the end of the hour, you're exhausted, mildly competitive, and weirdly uplifted. The walls feel less suffocating. The staff seem more like reluctant referees, and for a brief moment, you forget where you are. Recreation might not cure you, but it does something arguably more important. It reminds you that even in a place built on silence and structure, there's room for laughter, absurdity, and the sheer joy of losing gracefully at a game no one understands. The Women's Ward, a masterclass in enforced tranquility life. In the Women's Ward is less about healing and more about perfecting the art of quiet despair in lace. It's a place where emotions are folded, pressed and tucked neatly beneath layers of linen, where a loud sneeze qualifies as an outburst, and sighing is treated as a gateway drug to full-blown hysteria. The day begins not with joy, but with corsets tight enough to realign your ribs and ensure no one mistakes you for someone enjoying herself. The matron, a monument to starch and silent judgment, makes her rounds like a bishop inspecting a convent, her eyes scanning for untamed hair or signs of independent thought. Beds are straightened, petticoats are adjusted, and if your face doesn't radiate meekness and moral fiber, you're invited to reflect upon your attitude, perhaps over a sampler that reads, "A tidy stitch calms the soul." Occupational therapy in this wing is embroidery. Not painting or writing or anything dangerously expressive, but carefully monitored needlework involving only appropriate thread colors. Red is too racy purple, too suggestive of royalty. Beige is preferred. It promotes humility and dulls the imagination. You stitch quotes like "obedience is peace" while dreaming of stabbing the hoop through the nearest curtain. If you work too quickly, you're either a genius or in a manic state. If too slowly, perhaps, you're slipping into melancholia. Either way, more thread is issued and dessert is quietly removed from your future. Conversation is allowed, but only if it's as soft and agreeable as a damp sponge. Talking politics, dangerous. Literature, potentially inflammatory. Expressing personal opinions, grounds for supervised tea and a long lie down. The staff prefer topics like weather biscuits or the morally uplifting character of Queen Victoria. One woman's attempt to discuss Jane Austen resulted in a prompt visit from the chaplain and a week without reading privileges. Novels are considered both thrilling and toxic, read aloud only in monitored groups, lest someone get ideas. Ideas, after all, are where madness begins. Walking is encouraged, but only in gentle loops and never alone. Briskness is suspect, and wandering minds often lead to wandering feet. Any deviation from the approved garden path is considered an escape attempt or a symptom of restlessness, which is, of course, a diagnosable condition. A few bold patients have tried pacing slightly faster, but were swiftly redirected with a warm blanket and a strong cup of beef tea. Ah yes, beef tea, the great panacea. A lukewarm, beige beverage prescribed for everything from fainting spells to rebellious thoughts. If you look out the window too long, beef tea. Ask a question that starts with, "Why beef tea with a biscuit?" if you're lucky. It tastes like melancholy and boiled wallpaper, but is delivered with such reverence you start to wonder if it's the Queen's own blood. In the end, the women's ward is a place where calm is compulsory, and personality is politely ironed out. There are no outbursts, only symptoms, no opinions, only observations. And the only cure for everything, apparently, is beef tea served in silence. You're not sure if you're healing, but you are very, very well behaved. The doctor's rounds. A weekly drama. Once a week, like clockwork and prophecy combined, the doctors descend upon the ward in a carefully choreographed performance known as rounds. It's not so much a medical examination as it is theater with starched collars, Latin incantations, and the faint aroma of camphor and self-importance. Their approach is audible long before it's visible, the rhythm of polished boots, the murmured exchange of polysyllabic diagnoses, and the unmistakable sound of someone being told to sit up straighter for the sake of their spleen. The procession includes the head physician, whose notebook is so large and aggressively bound it could stun a small animal, followed by an assistant with a grim sense of duty, and usually one or two eager medical students armed with quills and expressions of academic terror. They begin at bed 1, where the patient is greeted with the warmth of a tax inspection and the familiar question, "How are we today?" delivered with the tone of someone asking if you've been digging escape tunnels under your mattress. Answers are irrelevant. Whether you reply "sleeping well" or "I keep dreaming that the curtains are judging me," the doctor will nod solemnly and declare it a textbook case of moderate nervous elasticity or sublimated existential deviation, which is definitely not a real thing. Bowels are inquired after with near-religious devotion. Pulse is checked with exaggerated drama. You're poked once on the wrist, once on the temple, and then invited to confess your deepest emotional failings through a lens of thinly veiled moral judgment. And always, always there is the monologue. The doctor steps back, clasps his hands, and begins a grand sermon about the dangers of idle minds, the benefits of embroidery, and how moral weakness leads directly to melancholia. A brisk walk, 3 root vegetables a week, and no emotional indulgence. He proclaims, as if he's personally solved the mystery of human suffering with cabbage and Protestant guilt. God forbid you mention reading, especially novels. Books are considered deeply suspicious. Poetry, practically criminal. Too many words lead to over-reflection, he warns, squinting at you as if a haiku might trigger an uprising. Meanwhile, the assistant doctor interjects with their own gems of wisdom. Avoid puddles. They encourage whimsy, and take your tonic before brooding. Speaking of tonics, they are the crown jewel of rounds. A vile blend of herbs, hope, and the taste of something that crawled out of a Victorian shoe. You're instructed to drink 2 spoonfuls daily with gratitude, not grimace. Most patients comply once, then quietly begin watering the nearest potted plant. The medical student, for their part, scribbles with the yield energy of someone who suspects this might one day be used in court. By the time the parade reaches your bed, you've memorized the rhythm question, poke, lecture, tonic, exit. The entire affair is less about treatment and more about spectacle. It's healthcare, with a flourish diagnosis by dramatic pause. And when the doctors finally vanish down the corridor, their coats flapping like overly judgmental bats, you're left clutching your bottle of bitter syrup and wondering whether the only thing they truly cured was their own boredom. Still, there's a strange comfort in the consistency. In a world of shifting moods and embroidery quotas, the doctors remain reliably baffling. They come, they preach, they mispronounce your name in Latin, and they leave. It's not exactly healing, but it's certainly tradition. And in the Victorian asylum tradition is the strongest medicine of all. The final words. So tonight, as you settle into your reasonably soft bed in a room without barred windows or the lingering smell of carbolic soap, take a moment to appreciate the absurd miracle of your current situation. No one is hovering with a tonic bottle. No matron is inspecting your socks for signs of rebellious stitching. You're not expected to discuss your bowel movements with a stranger in a frock coat or to suppress a yawn in case it's mistaken for moral decay. You lucky modern creature can simply sigh loudly, freely, and no one will reach for the beef tea. Because the truth behind all those tales of cold baths and enthusiastic phrenologists is this: the asylum wasn't just about madness. It was about control. About forcing tranquility with embroidery hoops and boiled cabbage. about diagnosing melancholic tendencies in anyone who preferred books to dinner parties. And yet, people survived. They stitched and walked in tight circles and sang Greensleeves one too many times without combusting. They told jokes, exchanged knowing glances, and dared to roll their eyes when the doctor started talking about root vegetables again. That's what lingers most, not the horror, but the humor. The quiet defiance, the way someone snuck extra sugar cubes or reclassified missing puzzle pieces as symbolic. The way life kept leaking into even the most rigid schedules. That spirit, messy, stubborn, beautifully human, is something to celebrate. So as you drift off tonight safe from hydrotherapy and overly concerned chaplains, remember this history is not just a museum of misery. It's a gallery of human resilience. We are descended from people who endured corsets and charades and managed to smuggle laughter into the least laughable places. You owe them nothing except perhaps a whispered thank you and a promise to never take indoor plumbing for granted. Sleep well, time traveler. May your sheets be soft, your dreams uninspected, and your mornings refreshingly free of lectures about moral fiber. And if you ever feel a little mad yourself, just remember at least you're not being examined for it by someone with a measuring tape and an unhealthy interest in skull bumps. Good night.